Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, June 5th meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. Before we jump into the agenda, is there any public comment from anybody on a topic not relating directly to an agenda item? Seeing none.
Yes.
Go, you have something? Okay, Kara.
I will speak quickly. I will use your 2-minute allotment, and I will let you know that I will not stay for the meeting so that you can earn back some time. I know you guys don't always, you're volunteers and you don't always connect the dots. So I'm going to connect some dots for you right now. And I hope I'll be brief with it so you can understand. This map was presented to me from the assessors with labeling of neighborhoods. It's very unfortunate that the land schedules that I've been asking for, I met with June, Heston, Josh, and the assessors almost 6 months ago. It's very unfortunate that land schedules have not been provided to the public to allow taxpayers to make informed decisions regarding the reappraisal. It's very important that taxpayers have this missing information. The town is divided into different land values. This map that they gave to me as part of the information is not valid. They have told me this map is not valid, but they gave it to me to use. So that's a problem. I want to just have you understand from a perspective of affordable housing to affluent housing. You can look up the statistics. You're very good at doing that. Look at Cody Road and Bordeaux Lane are mobile homes on a dirt private road with dirt driveways. They went up 80%, while Southview Drive is a paved public road with affluent houses, went up 33%.
Did you get that, James?
What was the lane name you said?
Cody Road,
And the other one?
Bordeaux Lane. They're neighboring roads. So I just want to say, when you start looking at adding sidewalks to affluent neighborhoods or increasing taxes and talking about affordability, we do not have a land schedule so that you cannot see what has happened to the neighborhoods and what the land values, not home values, land values are comparative. So if you have a mobile home on Cody Road, the value of your land is equal to the value in Southview. That's a problem. That's not equitable and that's not fair.
Okay, thank you, Kara. Josh, did you got all that down?
It's okay. I have notes and you can watch the meeting minutes later.
Okay.
The last thing before I lose my last 2 minutes is I have asked the town and Jay has agreed to put asset management plan on the agenda, which includes cars, mowers, fry wagon, and any other assets that are existing assets, along with a maintenance plan, such as who does the power washing of all of the benches in all of the parks to help maintain assets that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kara. Is there anybody else online or in person who would like to make a public comment?
I would like to, and I'm sorry I don't have a raise hand option.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, my name is Rachel Atkins. I live on East Hill Road. I've been a resident for 32 years and I am a certified HR professional. I see an update on the police hiring is on the agenda, but it doesn't look like there's any time for discussion. So I just wanted to take the time to say that given the high turnover that we've had in the police chief, that I think it's would be, and I don't know what you're going to say for an update, but in absence of that, I just want to say I would really encourage the town to look at the cost effectiveness and other benefits of contracting with the Heinsberg police chief, and that we, rather than retrofitting or regrouping and resurrecting the current process, that we take this opportunity to buy ourselves some time, do a pilot study of sorts of working with Heinsberg and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Per the agenda item that's later on down the road, we have gotten questions essentially saying, where are we in the hiring process? This is not the time or place tonight. because we have a very crowded agenda to discuss long-term policy. We're simply going to say, where do we stand? There are people who say it's been so dark and transparent, we don't know what's been done. That said, there have been multiple postings to Front Porch Forum, and also it's been outlined here, and yet people still say, I don't know what's going on. So that's really the primary purpose of that agenda item.
Just really briefly, Jay, this is Barb. I was one of the select board members that met with the Heinsberg representatives who told us to put on hold any conversation about merged or joint department.
Right.
Which is a complex interaction. It's easy to contract, just close down your police department and contract with somebody else, for better or worse. They can then end the contract if they feel like it. But a joint police department requires governance, and under state law is far more complicated than just, oh, let's have a joint department and change the labels on the police cars next week. So just to be clear, we started that conversation. It was put on hold at the request of the Heinsberg Select Board. And I think it's somewhere at the end of this summer that they were done with their strategic planning exercise.
Okay.
So that issue has not gone away, but it's sort of on the shelf at the moment.
Okay, so let's move on into the agenda. Our first item on our agenda relates to an issue that is passed through the Development Review Board. And it's not a, we do need to have a conversation about it, but we have motions in the agenda in the memo to move into executive session to get a quick update from our attorneys. Would somebody be willing to make those motions?
Oh.
Sure, this is Bard. I move to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's litigation with Comninos Zachary, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, would place the town at a substantial disadvantage because public disclosure of the discussion would jeopardize the town's litigation strategy and would lead to the disclosure of privileged and confidential attorney-client communications.
We have a
This
second.
is David, I'll second.
A motion from Bard, second from David, to find that general premature public knowledge would be disadvantageous. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye. Jeff, aye. David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Second motion, Jay, this is Bard. I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA 313A, 1E and F to discuss attorney-client confidential communications and the pending litigation brought by Comninos Zachary against the town and others, inviting the town manager and town attorney David Rue to join the executive session.
Okay, this is David, I'll second.
We have a motion from Bard, second from David. Go ahead and enter executive session and invite town manager and town attorney David Rue to join the executive session. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye. Jeff, aye. David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Before you guys all go, I just want to make sure who's taking a computer in there. I've got Dave Rue going into the virtual room. I have Jay.
I'm going to leave my laptop here
Laptop
locked.
here. Is anybody else? Are you logged into the meeting?
I'm not signing.
Okay, so then it's just Dave that needs to go in as well as this computer.
Okay, everybody at home, I anticipate this will be quick, but we will try to make it so.
How do I get into the room? Jay, why did I not see it?
Ooh.
Aaron, do you have audio and visual?
David, do you have a phaser?
Yep,
Right.
go right ahead.
Okay. So we are back. Thank you for your
Oh, a
patience and
phaser,
understanding, members of the public. Select Board, we have a proposed motion. Would somebody like to make it?
Yep, this is Bard. Jay, I'd like to move to authorize Stitzel, Page and Fletcher PC to enter its appearance on the town's behalf in the two cases filed by Comninos Zachary against the town regarding 23 Pleasant Street and the new Northfield Savings Bank.
Jay, this is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bard, seconded by Dave, to authorize our law firm to enter its appearance in the town's behalf in the two cases filed by Comninos Zachary against the town regarding 23 Pleasant Street and the new Northfield Savings Bank. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye. Jeff, aye. David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. Our next agenda item is to hear from the new Howard Center Assistant Director of Outreach Crisis Support, Scott LaValley. Is Scott with us?
Timeline.
There it
Scott.
is, Scott.
There you are. So Scott, we are ready to hear you. You're welcome to unmute and do you need to share? Do we need to give him sharing access?
Oh, you have a presentation, Scott?
Short one, yeah. That's
You're good to go.
primarily what I wanted to share.
Okay.
Wanted
Floor is yours.
Thank you everyone for letting me come on tonight. So you guys, yeah, you said I'm the Assistant Director of Outreach Crisis Supports. The presentation I have is just some information. It's a presentation I actually put together a few years ago when I was doing my doctorate program. I've just kind of configured the data to demonstrate Chittenden County. I didn't break it all the way down to each specific town because that's a lot more math. But I think it gives a fair representation of some of the things that make the community outreach program valuable, and things that I hope to put more of an emphasis on going forward as I work with the staff that work in that program to have a better understanding of these things going forward. So can I share screen now?
Yes, we can.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And let's see here. So I'm not sure who's familiar with the term ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. I know there's a recent conference here put on by Howard Center. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris spoke a great deal about it. You know, the study was done back in the early mid-late 90s. And some of the things that came out in the study, you know, represent, you know, some negative health outcomes that communities face. And this is just a very brief overview of why it's important for communities, and then focusing on the resilience to improve health outcomes for citizens.
Scott, are you sharing right now?
I think so. Can you see
None of
it?
us are seeing it.
No, so wait a minute. What is? Can I share? Okay, I can share a screen from here.
Okay, our sharing is working.
If something happened when I went into the change.
Scott, do me a favor, try again to, you know, click on the share button and
Here's a primary. See the chat. So weird. Why is it? Did something happen? We went into. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now we got you, Scott.
There we go.
Sorry about
I haven't had to
that.
do that in a little bit. Let me begin. Here we go here.
Very odd.
I want to get. It's gonna move that. There we go.
Interesting.
There we go. That's better. Everyone can see that?
you've got some weird black things overlying your presentation. Is there anything on your screen that, like the right half of the slide is kind of blacked out?
Is that better? Oh,
Nope.
Hmm.
oh yeah.
Well, let's just wing it. We'll, we can
Yeah,
see part of the
most
slide.
of it's gonna be. Is that better?
Whatever you just did to move it, that was good. Move that some more.
Alright.
Anyway, okay,
How's that?
there. Now we can see.
There we go. All right. Okay, let's see here. So okay. So I'm gonna go through as quick as possible in the interest of time here, just to put the information out there, and any questions, people can certainly reach out to me. This is something I hope to spend a little more time on in the near future. So real quick, the adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events that people have endured in that developmental phase of their life up to about 18 years of age. They're categorized in three groups: abuse, neglect, and household challenges. Abuse, these are the three: emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. Neglect, you know, so
God, I think you froze.
There you are.
or household challenges. So the intimate partner violence, substance abuse in the household, mental illness in the household, any type of parental separation, incarceration of a household member. You can see that our team spends some time in the county on those top 3 or so. So this is just to kind of bring it home a little bit. These are very common. There was a study, behavioral risk factor surveillance system. I know Vermont was one of the states that participated back in this section, this 5-year grouping here. It showed that 61% of adults had experienced at least one of these experiences, and about 17% had experienced more than 4. That number 4 is pretty significant because that's the tipping point where people start to experience a lot of negative health outcomes as they go into adulthood. These are the percentages that break it down to the more specific, not just the ACEs, but the actual type of adversity that people encounter. So you can see there's the emotional abuse is pretty high. Substance abuse, we know. I know there was just another suspected overdose last night of a young man in Chittenden County. So you can see those numbers, and it's pretty prevalent. So looking at the population of Chittenden County, we're looking at just under 170,000 people. So if we take all that data and we put it into like a population based on prevalence, we're looking at a little over 100,000 people in the county who've experienced at least one ACE, which is just to kind of make the point that these things are very common. It's very unlikely that someone gets through the first 18 years of life or so without experiencing some adversity. Then it's a little more significant to consider that almost 30,000 people have experienced 4 or more. And again, that's more where the real negative health outcomes kind of come into play. So it's not just, my parents are divorced. It's, my dad was incarcerated, my parents are divorced because my dad was hitting my mom, and there were, substance use in the home, right? So you start, the picture is just a little more bleak for that individual. This kind of breaks it down into those numbers again when we look at actual numbers and not percentages based on the population. So this is saying 58,000 people in Chittenden County. Again, this isn't based on the person. This is data that's based on prevalence of ACEs. Again, household challenges, intimate partner violence, substance abuse is pretty high. So a lot of these things, from my perspective, from what I see from where I'm working and I look out and what we're involved in the community, all these numbers kind of line up with what I've historically known to be typical. And then we move into like the resilience. So resilience is widely recognized as the ability to endure or recover quickly from challenging conditions. More recently, this idea is it's kind of framed as this resistance to stress. When we endure some stress, we bounce back. The adversity, the positive adaptation. And it's also notable that it's really hard to develop resilience when the adversity in childhood is overwhelming. So some of these behavioral characteristics, when we think of people that are resilient, these psychosocial factors, we look at active coping, someone that can cope, someone that's generally optimistic. Cognitive reappraisal, simply, I can appreciate other perspectives, I can reframe things and use that to kind of view things as opportunities and be optimistic about things and understand that sometimes, these struggles are most likely temporary. Again, pro-social behavior, being able to get along, not, pro-social behavior in short is I'm not having a lot of involvement with the police, right? And then being socially supportive. Again, the adverse childhood experience, these are events that most people would kind of consider them as potentially traumatic to the person that endured them. Acute and chronic toxic stress, we think of that as, you know, acute stress would be, you know, I'm heading to work and someone cuts me off and I almost hit them. That quick, real stressful snap back to reality. Blood pressure rises, you know, get a little upset. Think of the same situation. Chronic stress would be like I'm driving to work and for 20 minutes, 15 cars keep pulling out in front of me. So it just becomes like ongoing and chronic, and it's really hard to recover from that. Then we look at trait, process, and outcome resilience. Trait resilience is kind of, you know, if I'm born mostly like without any type of deficit, right? I'm born, you know, I'm healthy. I'm not growing up where, you know, I wonder where I'm going to be living, what I'm going to be eating. Process resilience is the kind of phenomenon where I experience some adversity, but it's adversity that I can get through, and then I build resilience off of that. And then that leads into what the outcome of resilience is when I overcome some adversity because I've either had the appropriate support, or when I have the skill set, the adaptability to overcome that adversity. That's the outcome resilience. So key players in developing resilience are obviously parents and families. So we try to do what we can to you know, foster, you know, healthy families, support parents, obviously social services, hospitals, human service agencies, pediatricians, the court system, law enforcement. I think that's one that's really important. One of the things that we strive with our community outreach program is to kind of augment law enforcement to, you know, for a lot of reasons, just to make sure we're handling situations appropriately. And, you know, we all bring different skills to the table, obviously with safety being at the forefront. The challenges of all this is a lot of these people, it's a really hard to reach population. If you think of all those challenges, there's a stigma associated with it. So we work really hard to build those relationships. You know, the folks, the specialists that work on that team are out there trying to connect with people, make relationships, to try and overcome that stigma and reach these populations of people that are hard to get to. And because a lot of these things just go quietly unobserved, I think that's particularly important when we look at rural communities, where there's space a lot of times between, you know, where we live, and we don't want to be nosy neighbors and those kinds of things. It's really hard for these, you know, these things are just, they're there, and they're pretty common. I think it gets confusing too, because some children demonstrate more resilience than others. That can be mostly explained a lot of times when we consider like the positive experiences that kids have in their communities and their families. And a lot of times, you know, kids that experience MESAs, or even young adults or adults in general, that have experienced a lot of adversity, these things, they just kind of present themselves as behavioral problems. And when we kind of scratch beneath the surface a little bit, we realize there's a lot of underlying trauma that's underneath all of that. And it's just coming out as behavioral problems because the person's struggling to figure things out and get through life in a way that's pro-social and supported. And a lot of the research is fragmented. There's people that are studying ACEs and resilience and trauma, and sometimes it's hard to kind of piece it together. And then solutions, a lot of times community forums, it's just kind of putting the information out there, and talking about it. And that's one of the reasons why I was very grateful to be able to come in and just have a few minutes tonight. Back in about 10 years ago, it was either 2013 or 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a memo for pediatricians to start implementing ACEs screenings into their practice. It's been inconsistent as to how many are actually doing it, but it's a pretty easy screening. It's 10 questions. And then we look at interventions that empower people to try and foster resilience, try to focus on individual strengths, family strengths, community strengths. So the community forums, we mentioned earlier a little bit, many challenges in adult society have their roots in early childhood adversity. So if we can provide some caregiver education around attachment, fostering positive emotions, and we put all this work together in trying to develop individual and community resilience. The pediatric screenings I mentioned, it's just an ideal place. I know across the board, the healthcare system really strives to have 100% of all children screened at least annually, just for regular health screenings. So it's really an ideal place to kind of capture this information and support people. The second one there, I mentioned that. And integrated care. And I think we strive for this, but sometimes it's a challenge to communicate between like the hospital and the Howard Center and individual practices. Hopefully it's a work in progress. This Empower Resilience Intervention, it's research recommends it's an approach that builds on strengths. I mentioned that earlier, trying to capitalize on the strengths that already exist in communities and in families, to try and, foster healthy dynamics and promoting resilience.
Scott, if I could.
And then,
Scott, this is Jay with the Select Board Chair. You're almost at your 15 minutes. I want to make sure that you get a chance to deliver your final pitch. Is there like a 2-minute quick sum up you could be doing?
yep, I got like probably about 30 seconds left here, then I'll have a minute.
Thanks.
This last piece here is just, it's trying to collaborate, solve these complex social issues. It does require kind of commitment and then the ability to collaborate. It requires, programs like mine to be competent. We got to be, help move forward on trust and transparency. Trying to bring community partners together. Again, that's kind of some of the things that I want to work on. Eliciting like faith-based organizations that have some reach. Raising community awareness, reducing stigma, and then really, demanding better services. So that's one of the goals. That's kind of my pitch here is, I want to, we can always strive to be better in the services that we provide. And that's one of my goals, going forward to try and, I could take this off now.
Okay, well, we thank you for your presentation. Does anybody on the Select Board have any questions for Scott?
Yeah, I do.
Jeff?
So Scott, I value this program. We've invested in this program for a number of years, as I recall. And we encourage our police department to utilize you. I think that's probably our primary contact with your program is through the police department. It would be really good to know that data, of how often your services are utilized in our community. You have very alarming data, so you have more incidents of abuse in Chittenden County than there are children. I don't know
So that's including all people, right? So that would be all people, like the full from birth to the whole lifespan, right? Because it's all based on population.
Okay, so and the ACE was, as I understood, the ACE was under 18, but regardless, do you have any data that's relative to Richmond specifically?
In regards to the ACEs?
In regards to any activity that you have participated in Richmond from our either community members or police department.
And I think you're referring to the out program in that.
Yes, that's what in the community outreach program.
Yep, so that's the quarterly data. So we issued the quarterly data April, and then we'll issue it out again in July. So we do it quarterly, and then in July it'll also be for the fiscal year, the previous fiscal year that we're in now.
Well, I would be interested in seeing that data. I don't know if is it readily available someplace that we have? Is it like on our website anywhere or anything like that?
I don't know if I have the most recent ones up there, but some of it's on there and I can get all of the other stuff. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think Josh should have it.
One last question. Hey, Scott, a question for me. Does your data include elder abuse, elder neglect, or any of those sorts of elder mishaps?
That doesn't know.
Okay.
hey, we have a question from Stephanie. Stephanie, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Stephanie Hartsfield. I'm a Richmond resident and thank you, Scott. And I agree with what Jeff said. And I want to thank you for all the collaboration with the Howard Center and with crisis outreach. I think we've had this partnership since about 2017 and we've helped to divert a lot of police calls, as the select board said. So that's been really, really helpful. And I guess I just have two questions that you don't have to answer now, but if you could follow up just with Josh or someone, that would be great. And just one is like, how do you see, because we have a slimmed down, a short staffing in our police department, and we're kind of debating the future of it. I guess I'd like some follow-up to know, how do we see that collaboration continuing in the future, just because we're working on that. And then the second part of it is resiliency is part of our current town plan, and it's a big effort here. And we do have a lot of, we're rural and we do have a lot of incidences around that. And we've been working hard on how to really promote youth resiliency and improve. And we're trying to start a prevention coalition because we are a gap area in that way as well. So the other question is just how can the Howard Center in general, whether it's crisis outreach or other areas, support these rural towns, whether it's financially or policy wise, in just bolstering resiliency and those kind of areas. So to come back to the town of the select board, knowing that we have data and how it works to support us out here and the nether regions of Chittenden County. Thanks.
Good question. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And so I just wanted to clarify one thing off of Jeff's question. So the ACEs questionnaire, the idea behind that, all the research on it is that the experiences happen when an individual prior to their 18th birthday, right? So then a lot of those screenings were when now the people are adults. And so it's retrospective in that sense. And then when we take that prevalence data, we're looking at the whole population. So that does include children that are still under 18, that maybe they've experienced one or two ACEs, but they might experience one or two more before they become 18. And then it's also the ACEs, it's not necessarily each incident, it's the type of adversity. That's what they're counting in that study. I do have a presentation on ACEs that goes into it pretty heavily, but it wouldn't be appropriate for a short, 10, 15 minute conversation. It's more of a 45 minute or an hour long kind of deep dive into the science behind it. But yeah, Jeff, you're right. Those numbers represent more kids than are actually in Chittenden County. Because it's actually looking at the entirety of the population. So you might have someone that's 70 that experienced that adversity below 18. So just to clarify that.
So we have a very full agenda tonight. I'm going to take one more question, and we really do need to move on. Denise.
Scott, I have a question on the outreach program. Is it a free service to the town of Richmond, or do we contract with you?
Contract.
And how much is that?
I'm not sure what each town
We
pays.
can look it up for you.
It's about
Sort of.
9,000. It's about
Yeah.
9,000 to 10,000 per year. For
And
Richmond.
how many times did you come to Richmond or participate with Richmond on different cases last year? Different cases?
I don't have that data with me right now. It comes out quarterly. We send it out to all the towns. So I would say Josh would probably have.
Yeah, it
Maybe
would
come
probably,
back
I
at
think,
the end of the year and talk about the data and the money. And
Yeah.
more.
Right.
also,
Did you get the number of times that you dealt with a Richmond family on a different case to Josh for us?
Okay, we'll follow up with Scott to get this data.
and it's,
Okay.
I just want to say, it's more than just police response too. Being part of the program allows people to call them independently as well. So there's other resources there in addition to just police response. And I think we can go over that probably in a July meeting after the annual data is out.
Okay. So thank you, Scott.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right, thank you.
Our next agenda item relates to transit service in Richmond. We have this listed as a 30-minute item, but we are pretty far behind at this point. I'd like to acknowledge that we have with us tonight the consultant who put together the study on transit service in Richmond. The 20,000-foot view, the study is in the packet. It's 9 pages long. It's very well thought out, a lot of information there. 20,000-foot view is the ridership would not justify the cost. It would cost about twice as much as any other route to provide the service here in Richmond. So while we all like very much the idea of having bus service from here to Williston or here to Waterbury, or even just microtransit going from the Richmond Village to the park and ride, it's very difficult to make an economic case for it, which is, I regret, because I'd like to see that. So that's the 20,000-foot view, but I'm going to pass the ball now to Stephen Falbell. Would you like to go ahead and give us some more detail?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't know if Clayton or Jamie want to say something first, put it in context, or I can just jump right in.
I'm happy to jump in, Steve. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Smith. I'm the Director of Planning and Marketing at Green Mountain Transit. I'm also a resident of the town of Richmond, so excited to be here with you all tonight. And just for some context, GMT was approached by the town of Richmond Transportation Committee, specifically Chris Cole and Kathleen Gent, to take a look at transportation options. And at that time, we did meet with the town planner, former town planner, Ravi Venkataraman, to discuss, different options. Steve outlined some of those options that we had proposed in the scope in the study that was in your packet. And so I think he's going to go through a couple of those. And then, sorry, I should have mentioned, I'm also joined by Clayton Clark, who is General Manager from Green Mountain Transit. And we are happy to answer any questions after Steve's presentation.
Thanks. I will share my screen with the memo and just go through it pretty quickly and highlight a couple of things, because we do want to allow for enough time. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet, the memo talks about what was requested from the Transportation Committee, and there was an original idea to think about a bus route from Waterbury through Richmond to Williston, as well as a separate feeder service within Richmond, whether that's microtransit or a regular circulating bus route. I talk about those ideas. I did some analysis based on commuting data. I explain why commuting data is still an important thing to look at, even though many people are working at home. This section gives you some numbers of commuters to various areas and also from various areas. So for Richmond residents, this is where they're going. You can see some of the numbers here: Burlington, South Burlington, Williston, so forth. For people working in Taft Corners, this is where they're coming from at the town level. The numbers from Richmond, Bolton, and Waterbury. For people working in Waterbury Village, this is where they're coming from. You can see that the numbers heading toward Chittenden County are generally higher than the numbers heading toward Waterbury in Washington County. And then for people who work in Richmond Village, if you think of reverse commuters coming to Richmond Village, this is where they're coming from. You have pretty decent, strong numbers from Burlington and South Burlington and Williston, but less so from areas to the east. And the next part just defines those areas, what we're talking about in the Richmond census designated place, in Waterbury Village, how I define those areas, and Taft Corners. And I'd be happy to answer questions about that, but I won't go into detail on that now.
We have a question for you, Bard.
Yeah, so Stephen, my first observation when I go back to the map and Richmond, if you will, you see where that ends. Just above the tail to the left there is the Richmond Park and Ride.
Yep.
And if you go about 300 yards further, you come to a mobile home park.
Right. This is considering the Richmond as a workplace destination rather than as a source for commuters.
So that's kind of my question. If we're focused on that, and we were talking about over the years, and I've been at this, I don't know, a decade, including how people get from the mobile home park to the village itself, how people get from the mobile home park to the park and ride, which you can hit an 8-iron golf ball there, but you can't get there by foot. So I guess my question is beyond the CDP, how we deal with those issues, where do you get to those later?
Yeah, I definitely consider that. That map of the CDP was only in context of these numbers here, of where people who are commuting to Richmond from other places, where they're going in the CDP. But in terms of commuting to other places, I definitely included the mobile home park and the rest of Richmond Village. So the feeder service definitely is designed to serve Riverview Commons. And so, yeah, this map of Richmond Village is saying only if we're thinking about commuters to Richmond, this is the area we're thinking about, because I don't think there are many jobs up there. They're just, people living there. Most of the jobs in Richmond are within this CDP. Did that answer your question for now anyway? Okay, thanks. I'll keep moving. This next section talks about the proposed services. Again, it gives context for why I decided to focus on a service that does not go into Washington County because of the fewer number of commuters there, and that the best use of resources would be a single route that combines a feeder component which circulates through Riverview Commons as well as the most populated parts of the town, and then turns into a line haul service so that with one bus route, you can have a one-seat ride both to the park and ride and connect to the link buses, as well as with a one-seat ride, get to Williston Village and get to Taft Corners. And so that's the concept I further developed. You can see the two maps here. This is the line haul portion of the route going from the park and ride to Taft Corners. This is the feeder portion of the route going through Riverview Commons, serving the park and ride, continuing into the village, through the heart of the village, and turning around in this area, sort of in the southern part, sort of the edge of where the most densely developed portions of Richmond are. So those two services were sort of linked together, and I present a potential timetable here, how it could work. And this is not the prettiest timetable ever, but let me just try to explain what it means. So this left column talks about the link buses that serve the Richmond Park and Ride and what times they arrive there, both those going inbound, that is toward Burlington, and outbound toward Waterbury and Montpelier. So the feeder service was designed to hit as many of those link trips as possible. So this feeder service would start in Richmond Village, go to the park and ride. You can see that 6:25 arrival there would allow people to transfer to the 6:35 inbound and the 6:40 outbound buses. It goes through the Riverview Commons, gets back to the park and ride, so people in Riverview Commons would also have the ability to transfer to those buses. It then goes to Williston Village and Walmart. It goes back to Riverview Commons, does another run, serves these buses, and does another run. So that's sort of the morning service. In the midday, it does a similar thing. Again, serving the link buses is relatively little link service midday, but it provides shopping access to Taft Corners. And then in the afternoon, again, serves those link buses and also provides reverse service from Taft Corners to Richmond Village. And there's some discussion about here whether you would do it as a scheduled route or just whoever's on the bus, they would get taken to where they're going. So I can stop there and see if you have any questions on that proposed service before we talk about the conclusions.
Anybody? Looks great, Lisa.
Yeah, Steve, the future brings, a lot of affordable housing in the area. Richmond's concentrating on that as a state mandate, of course. Do you plan to update this maybe in a couple of years or each year or so for the housing stock that's going to increase? Because those people are most likely going to be employees someplace, and probably not in Richmond. So at least speaking about Richmond. So there's going to be more transit need, I think, in the medium future than you're looking at right now, which should enhance your numbers, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers of people were, in terms of the population served, was, in the range of 500 or so. And so the degree to which new development comes online and pushes that to 550 or 600 or more then we can certainly consider new numbers there. And at the end of the memo, I say, this is based on past experience about what percentage of people typically use bus services. But if there were concerted efforts and incentives and, a real community spirit of Richmond to say, we're going to take advantage of this, then we could, see higher than normal usage. But I don't want to assume sort of the rosy scenario going in and sell you an idea that may not be popular based on broader experience. Any other questions now?
Yeah, this is Bard. So, one of the roots of this was when a previous select board member, Roger Brown, was talking about like, how could we get a van and, connect more people to more places. And at the time we were talking about, maybe start small with fewer days, so maybe just if you could talk about that, the trade-offs between the number of days and number of trips and riders, because there's both higher cost and higher ridership the more you do it, right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it depends what your target market is. If you're thinking of this as a shopping shuttle only, then yes, you can do it a couple of days a week and people can organize their shopping trips around that. If you're trying to attract commuters, then a service that only runs a couple of days a week will not be attractive and no one will do that. So it depends on what you're aiming for. So what I designed here was sort of a maximal service to serve every link trip, to provide at least 2 or 3 trips in each peak period to give people flexibility to attract the most number of passengers. There could be reductions. The memo talks about trimming the number of trips, but given GMT work rules where there's a 2-hour minimum for any driver shift, you can't cut it down to 1 trip because then you'll just be paying a driver for a lot of wasted time and that won't save you money. So if GMT is going to operate this, there's certain limits to the cost savings. If it were operated by somebody else, if you wanted to contract out to SSTA or some private agency that could do it for lower cost, then that's a little bit of a different story that affects the cost ratios. But if GMT is going to do it, this is sort of the best we can do.
Any other questions?
So further down, you talk about funding and you said that this service would cost about $300,000 a year. You talk about a 20% local match, or for Richmond, it would be about $60,000. Where would the rest of the money come from?
It would be federal, primarily federal money. There's a fund called CMAQ, which stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. And VTrans has discretion with these federal funds to allocate them to new projects, new proposals. And it is generally an 80-20 match. And GMT works with local communities to provide that 20% match for the federal funds.
Is that a competitive grant?
Yeah, generally the agency would put in a grant application and they would have to justify the service and say, here's the need, here's the proposed ridership. We think it's a viable service. This is a marginal service for an urban area. It's competitive with rural commuter services, but we're not really in a rural area here. It's a little more suburban. It's certainly not urban out in Richmond, but it's different from, say, the Northeast Kingdom or places that are truly rural.
So you're suggesting that if we applied for a grant, we would not be that competitive? Is that what you're suggesting?
It's hard to say. We don't know who's going to be applying for what in any given year, and the amount of funding varies from year to year, depending on federal appropriations. So it's hard to say. I can't say that you would get rejected, but one thing VTrans looks at carefully is the degree of support in the community. And, if the select board said, yes, we will put up the $60,000 and we're going to do a concerted effort to make people aware of this service and to really promote it, that scores points with VTrans to show that kind of local support.
And what are the timelines for those grant proposals?
Well, a series of grant applications just went in April for the coming fiscal year. I forget if they're on a 2-year cycle now. I don't know for sure off the top of my head, but at this point you'd probably be applying for fiscal 25 to do it, which would start July 1st of next year.
Just an observation, and some of you will remember this conversation about our geographical complexities. In previous discussions with VTrans, we pointed out that the way they configured Route 2 and the interstate and the park and ride precluded access to the park and ride from our single largest, arguably our single largest point of affordable housing at the mobile home park. Like, there's no way to get there from here. At one point, we suggested maybe they put in like an overhead tram to get there.
Gary Gressers has a tunnel.
But literally, that's sort of a challenge, and that's a key piece here. When you think about our workforce problems and how people get to work, and when they can't get there from here, it's a subtle thing that's not really clear from just the map itself, that there's no real viable pedestrian access from the mobile home park to the park and ride, even though it's several hundred yards, 500 yards, whatever it is, 200 yards.
Tough.
Not even easy on a bicycle.
So that's just, it's a point of this where it's not as obvious in the map or the ridership, but, and I don't think we know if people are going to use it until we sort of tried it. So that leads to my final kind of question, I think, is, you know, is it viable to do this for a year as trial, see what you get for customers, sort of drum it up and see if we get enough ridership to make it viable or appealing in the longer term?
Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to respond to that. There's an example in Waitsfield of just a bunch of community members sharing a single Subaru Forester to provide rides to people in town to get to where they need to go. And one option to do this, you know, very inexpensively would be to have some set of, you know, volunteers in Richmond with a vehicle that either the town owns or that is, you know, put up to try this out, to inform people in Riverview Commons that they now have access to run that and to demonstrate that there's a need for it, and that could help build the case at a very low cost. Again, because having GMT do it is going to be more expensive.
Isn't that what United Way does in United We Ride? That they connect people offering rides with people needing rides?
Yes, I mean, it's United We Ride is a very broad concept. There are various, you know, volunteer driver programs around. There's less so in Chittenden County than there are in other places. And some of them are hyper local, like the Waitsfield one I mentioned. But, you know, United Way is often a partner in these kinds of programs. So that's a possibility.
Okay. Any final questions before we thank these three? Go ahead.
So the one last thing that this is less discouraging than what you might seem. $60,000 would cost us less than buying a vehicle and insuring it for private drivers.
That one.
You know, so David suggests.
Yeah.
You know, I would encourage the Transportation Committee not to drop this. But to continue to think about, you know, perhaps, you know, at least investigating whether to submit a grant application for either next year or the year after, and keep it on the table.
So maybe that's a future agenda item with the Transportation Committee to say, how do we move this forward? Recognizing it's a little uphill in terms of competition for VTrans money at this kind of deep subsidy. But what else could we do? And have a conversation about that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Something if I can add in, I'm Clayton Clark, the General Manager at Green Mountain Transit. And first off, hi Bard, it's good to see you. And one of the things I want to make sure that you all are aware of is that Green Mountain Transit is facing sort of a dual cliff scenario. Where our COVID, we are operating more service than our revenue can support. And we're able to do that right now because we have COVID relief funds that are dwindling and will expire in the next 12 to 24 months. And when that expires, we're probably going to have to be looking at service reductions. The other side of the cliff is that right now, when you see one of our 40-foot buses operating in Chittenden County, there's about a 1 in 3 chance that operator is on overtime. And our staff, the staffing for CDLs is pretty critical. And so I think that even though this is something where I love the idea of going further out in Chittenden County and providing connectivity into Williston, that there's going to be some really hard realities pushing against you. It's going to be kind of like the fish going up the stream. It's not impossible, but it's going to be tiring. And so I just want to make sure you all are aware of those things.
That's helpful, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton, and thank you, Stephen, and I apologize, the third person. Thank you, all of you who came to speak to us tonight. I apologize.
Okay, thank you so
Next
much for
item-
having us.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Our next item on the agenda is back again. It relates to the ongoing process of amending the zoning regulations for the Village Residential Commercial District and the Gateway Residential Commercial District. Before we go into discussions of these, we have warned tonight as a hearing on these changes. And we do have Virginia Clark, who is head of our Planning Commission, and Keith Oborn, who is our Director of Zoning and Planning, or Planning and Zoning. So we'll be calling on them. But the first thing we have to do, of course, is open the meeting. So there is a motion in the packet if somebody would like to make the motion to open the meeting.
Well, I'll do that, if I can read this long. I move to open the public hearing for the consideration to amend Richmond zoning regulations, sections 2.5.2, 3.1.1, 3.1.2, 3.2.1, 3.2.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5.1, 3.5.2, 3.6.1, 3.6.2, 3.7.1, 3.7.2, 3.8.1, 3.8.2, 3.9.1, 3.9.2, 3.10.1, 3.10.2, 4.5, 5.5, 6.1.2, 6.1.3, 7, and the official zoning map and its legend. Minor references related to the district name changes have been amended in the following additional sections: Table of Contents 2.1, 5.7.3, 5.7.4, 5.12.2, and index.
Yes. Do we have a second?
This is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have an extremely lengthy motion from Jeff Ford to open the public hearing for consideration to amend the Richmond zoning regulations and the map and its legend. This was seconded by David Sander. Is there any discussion before we vote on to open the hearing? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote to open the hearing.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. The hearing is open. Virginia, are you prepared to speak to this? You're muted.
Can you unmute?
Okay, yep,
There
got
you
it, unmuted. Well, in the amount of time that is allotted, I'm not sure exactly what you are interested in hearing about. What I will go over is what has changed since the initial presentation of information from the Planning Commission. Basically, at the discussion meeting that the Select Board held, there was the majority of the discussion centered around adding the parcels on the Jericho Road between the traffic light and the schools into the Village Residential Commercial District. And based on information that was gained from a on-the-ground visit to these sites, information presented by the neighbors. It was determined that this was possibly not ideal to add these lots into the village residential commercial district, but to leave them in the district which they are currently in, which is the high density residential district that includes Southview and Hidden Pines, those districts just north of the village. So that's really the only change that was made from the information that was determined by the Planning Commission to be a good rewrite of the Village Residential Commercial District and the Gateway Village Commercial District. Both of these are mixed-use districts, but all the text of the amendments remained the same. The map has changed to show the removal of the Jericho Road lots from the amended zoning regulation map.
Thank you, Virginia. Bart has a question.
Virginia, Bard,
Yeah.
just wondering, anything you would expand or expound on why about that change of that section of Jericho Road?
What would you like to hear?
Well, you could say why.
Why that change was made?
Yeah.
So
Oh, you were out of town, weren't you?
the,
Yes, you were.
yes.
Okay, so
Okay, yes, you
some
were.
people came to the hearing that we held. I guess this was the one over at the library. Residents, you guys probably remember their names. I'm bad with names. But
Okay,
residents who
Carl.
live in that section, they've
Carl
fixed
Gerson,
some
Amy
houses.
Lord.
Yep,
Gerson,
Carl
Amy-
Getz, Amy Lord.
And they said that they did not think it was a good idea to have commercial businesses going in there.
Hmm.
And they made a fairly good case, I think.
Okay, that's a good, no, thank you.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different points. The Planning Commission did put together a list of pros and cons. There are very few lots that are very developable in that area. The site distances are bad. There's a hill, there's a curve. The sidewalk that we went to great length to have created going between the village and the schools now does host quite a number of people walking, including children. So adding uses that have more in and out traffic seemed to put that at risk somewhat. We didn't want to endanger any of those pedestrians. And the amount of space on those small lots, especially the ones nearer to the traffic light, there's no space really to make a turnaround. So the traffic would be exiting, as the traffic from the residences now does. The traffic would be exiting out onto, across the sidewalk onto the road backwards. So this doesn't seem super desirable. The high density residential district does allow some commercial uses. So for instance, the pediatrician's office is in that high density residential district. So that would be something that would be allowed, an office type of business. The residential commercial district envisioned additional businesses besides offices and personal services and so on. So it just seemed like those lots were not very suitable for a lot of commercial usage, even though theoretically, it's a great place for businesses because it's near the village and it's on a main arterial, which is where businesses tend to succeed because of visibility. In actual fact, when we looked at these lots on the ground, it kind of made sense to us that we shouldn't, increase the commercial use by a great deal because of the way the neighborhood currently exists, and that there aren't a lot of ways that you can alter it to make it more suitable for commerce. So I don't know if that answers your question, Bard.
I think Amy and Carl made a pretty good case that neighborhood that from Bridge Street to the school is different than Main Street or the southern part of Bridge Street. And the most likely turnover would be to professional offices. And that they made the case that their neighborhood is more like your neighborhood, more like Tilden, Albert Avenue, or Baker Street than it is like Main Street or Bridge Street. Yeah, just, I thought it was an interesting, they made a pretty good
They
case.
did, yeah.
Yeah, and when, Keith and Lisa and I walked around extensively in that neighborhood, and the lots to the highway side of Jericho Road have steep cliffs up to the highway, and the lots on the other side have steep cliffs down towards the Baker and Tilden neighborhood. So the lots themselves aren't terribly suitable. The lots at the upper end are flatter. There's a little more space between Burnett Court and the schools, but those lots, the site distances are bad. There's a curve that goes under the highway there. The terrain is somewhat hilly, so they didn't seem, from a commercial point of view, that desirable as, more commercial either. So, yeah, anyway, it will still allow some uses like the doctor's office that went in there, that kind of thing.
Okay. Keith, did you have anything to add?
The only thing I would, can you hear me for number one?
Yep.
Okay, the only thing I would add is there are severe site limitations for development there. It's built out, you have natural issues, natural feature issues, and maneuverability on the lots is just almost non-existent, to be honest with you. So that's all I have to add to it.
Okay.
And one other point is that in terms of commercial, the Planning Commission is struggling with the nature of what commercial activities are going to look like in the future. Commerce has changed, 15, 20 years ago when we were working on the residential commercial district, we were trying to allow for there to be more commercial district, as many communities were. Now many communities are trying to allow for more housing because we have a severe housing shortage. Commercial activities have changed their nature. We don't know exactly what the future of bricks and mortar commercial operations are going to look like. So it may not necessarily be worth struggling to add more commerce, even though we would like to have commerce in our downtown. It's very important to us. But in the end, this, the need for allowing plenty of commerce didn't really seem to outweigh the disadvantages to this area.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public?
Oh, I have one. My name's Adam Wood.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it clear that I'm now on the planning commission, so I want to make it clear.
Actually, could you speak into that mic?
Of myself and not the planning commission, but I think one of the I fully agree with the entire idea that area is not conducive to more commercial. It would negatively impact a lot of the people, and it's not a great spot for it. However, one of the big changes I think that was overlooked a lot is that removing this area from the proposed map reduces the residential density pretty significantly, and even including the changes that the Planning Commission is making to the high density residential district are significantly less dense than the residential and commercial district, to the point that, so full transparency, my wife and I bought a lot at 280 Jericho Road. We were kind of bouncing around with what to do with that, whether we're going to move there or what we're going to do. We settled on building a duplex, kind of with a family member who's going to own or occupy it. And under the proposed regulations, before the maps were changed, we would be able to put 4 units there and condoize them and sell them. So before, sub $350,000 units, 3-bedroom apartments, it'll now be 2. And just kind of how the economics work out, the cost of those is pretty significantly higher. So I think that the commercial is kind of a non-starter, but I don't want the residential density to get lost, and I don't want to come across as self-serving. I'm totally happy. My sister is totally happy to live in a duplex. We're going to work on it and finance it together so she can afford a house in Richmond. It's great, but I do think that there are other properties also that are probably in a similar situation where we are going to give up a pretty significant amount of density on a road where there is the ability to support that. So.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Is there any other comment from members?
I could make
Go ahead.
comment about that, which is that one of the goals in our current proposal to update the entire zoning ordinance district by district is because we want to respond to the housing crisis. So we know that we have underbuilt in housing in Chittenden County and Vermont for decades. So one of the things that we had added to the residential commercial district, besides the commercial uses, was an increase in the ability to put up multifamily housing and to remove some barriers to putting additional housing. This is kind of what Adam was referring to. So we have not yet taken on revising the high density residential district. So it is possible that in our goal to add more housing to a number of districts, we will add a greater ability to put more housing in the high density residential district. So that is not out of the question entirely. It may not fit with Adam's schedule for building his duplex, but you know, everyone is kind of all the parts of the village and the town are, we're trying to encourage people to think about the fact that there are people who don't have any homes, that we don't have enough homes, that we need to do some more building, a little more density in the village where there's water and sewer. In the outlying areas, we're going to have to weigh that against preserving land for climate change reasons. So the high density residential area may come up for consideration for some more ability to put more units.
I sat back down and I don't remember what I was going to say. So thank you, Virginia.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there any
Thank
other
you, Adam.
comments?
And
Are
thank
there
you
any
for being on the planning commission.
Are there any other comments from members of the public? Are there any other comments from members of the select board? Jeff?
So Virg, you've been following that bill that passed in the legislature that is going to apply to the future zoning ordinances.
S100, yes.
Doesn't that encourage increased density in residential neighborhoods?
It mandates it, actually.
Okay.
The bill, as far as we know, the bill has not been signed yet. It will have to be signed by tomorrow, which is the 5th day since the governor received it, S100. So we will know by Wednesday. We should know if it's been signed or if it's going to need a veto override, which we wouldn't know what will happen. But that bill requires neighborhoods that are served by water and sewer and that allow for residential building will be required to allow 3 and 4 unit buildings and some other changes to make it easier to put more housing. The legislature has grown tired of encouraging communities to do this, and now they've decided they're going to mandate it.
Okay.
Like I say too, the planning commission's been working that S100 text into this ever since it was first developed. So. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
these RC districts, the 2 that we're talking about tonight, actually include most of those features. And the reason for that is because the housing consultant that the housing committee had a year and a half ago brought this to our attention. She said, it is coming down the pike. There will need to be more housing allowed. Regulatory barriers to housing will have to be removed. So we took that information seriously in putting together these districts. So there will be very little changes that have to be made in these districts. We will have to definitely consider it going forward with the next districts that we take up.
Okay. Seeing no further public comment, this is not the vote to approve or reject the changes. We just need to close the hearing. Would somebody be willing to offer that motion?
Yeah, I moved to. Oh,
That's right.
I moved to close the hearing, the public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Jeff and a second from Lisa to close the public hearing. Is there discussion as to whether we should close the hearing? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, the hearing is now closed. However, you have as much time as you need to discuss what our action should be and choose whether or not you wish to make a motion. If you wish to make a motion, it is at the bottom of page 3 in the memo.
So I do have an issue that I would like to bring up. So one of the things that we have not discussed in this zoning change is the Gateway District. And there are a couple of things in the Gateway District that I would like to address. So if under the allowed uses, permitted uses, and the conditional uses, one of the things that's been changed in this iteration from previous zoning ordinances is it's removed restaurants and retail. So they're not permitted uses and they're not conditional uses. And there's a number of reasons why I think, you know, and Virginia could speak to it, but conceptually, retail and restaurants are high density businesses that would increase traffic on Route 2 and exacerbate traffic issues on Route 2 coming into the village. And, you know, we're working hard on trying to consolidate our commercial businesses within the village. That's where that's where our highest density is, and that's where we'd like to see development. And so the three really uses under the conditional uses that seem awfully retail-ish to me or restaurant would be bank, brewery, and grocery store. And my question, you know, or something to discuss would be whether or not we should eliminate those from the conditional uses as well.
I have nothing to offer, but the planning commission members present might. Virginia, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So we have a limited amount of space for commercial activities in Richmond. And we've removed the lots going up the Jericho Road, so we've removed even more commercial space. To have a viable town, we really feel like we do have to have some commerce, because if we only have housing, which we need, then there's nothing to walk to for those people if you want to have a walkable village with commercial activities and residential. So in the Gateway District, we have tried to protect the scenic entrance to Richmond quality of the Gateway District while allowing for there to be some commercial uses. This district is one that was originally a commercial district, the Gateway Commercial District. We have made it a residential commercial district by allowing residential uses there. However, we need some more space where we can have some commercial uses. And we can encourage all our commercial uses to be in the center of Richmond, but if we want to expand anything beyond our tiny commercial areas in Richmond, we have to go somewhere. This is the next logical place to go. We feel that there's room to have another restaurant that is slightly out of town, that we don't have to require that every single business that we have be located in the middle of the town. We've placed some restrictions on the grocery store size and the pharmacy size by requiring them to be village scale, which is 5,000 square feet or less, so they will be small. We have not allowed strictly retail uses to allow for the lack of interest from some of the formula businesses. They will not be interested in the small scale that we have required, and we have not allowed retail as a standalone use. The restaurant, the grocery store, we feel this is a good place if we're going to have, you know, for one thing, we can't guarantee that these businesses are always going to be located in the center of Richmond. We would like to think that we're always going to have a grocery store there. What if there isn't a grocery store there for some reason? You know, are we going to make people drive to Williston? Are we going to, in terms of cutting down the miles traveled by people, we would like to have as many things as close to the village as possible. if not in the village. Once the village is pretty much built out, which it is in terms of commercial space, this would be a place that we could allow those. So that's really why we have allowed a restaurant. We already have one restaurant out in that area, the Exit 11, you know, the Checkered House Inn, now Vermont Fine is a restaurant out there. Why not have a restaurant there? So we didn't really see any reason to restrict that area from some of these commercial uses. We do feel like we put enough guardrails around them to make them not look like strip development. They're going to utilize the same access points that currently exist. There's a restriction on putting any new access points. So if a new business were to come there in anywhere except for the Willis Farm property, and the Willis Farm property is a commercial enterprise that the REAPs have been developing over the years, we feel that it's important to allow them to proceed with their commercial enterprise in that node. There will be a single access, the Willis Farm Road, and any traffic emanating from different buildings within that will have to use that access. So what was the other one? Bank, brewery, grocery store. The Planning Commission didn't really feel that we wanted to completely restrict businesses from that area. That's basically while protecting its use, its function as a scenic access into Richmond, as a scenic entranceway to Richmond.
I'll just weigh in with my 2 cents. I support these changes. I think an enormous amount of work has gone into proposing them and researching them and developing them. And I really am grateful to the apparently endless patience that the members of the Planning Commission have had to muster throughout all this. And I'm really grateful to the people in our community who've given input. So I can't and won't make the motion, but I would support the motion if anybody wishes to make it.
We did have people weigh in on both sides of this debate. And we had a lot of, in the beginning, when it looked like water and sewer was going to be easier to put out there, we wanted to make it compatible with Act 250. And so we made changes that did not allow it to look like a built-up commercial strip development. We have landscaping requirements. There's no parking in the front of these buildings, so any parking would be behind. So they would continue to enhance the appearance into Richmond, but still allow people to do something which residents might enjoy using.
So I agree with Jay. I really appreciate the work that the Planning Commission has done on this. I think they've done the person's work, and I'm not suggesting disparaging that whatsoever. However, I would point out that there are a number of commercial businesses beyond the ones that I've mentioned that are conditional uses, and none of them are walkable. You cannot walk to the Gateway District as it stands now, even after the Route 2 upgrade. You cannot walk there safely. You can't even ride a bike safely. It's much as members of this select board have tried very hard to encourage VTrans to do. And so I would like to move that from the section 3.4.3 to remove these conditional uses from the list of conditional uses. Number B, bank. Number C, brewery. Number P, grocery store, village scale. Coming. Number DD, restaurant standard. And number H, tavern.
Okay, so is there a second? Hearing no second. Is there anybody who would like to make any other motion?
I didn't run for this office to be popular.
That's okay. Sometimes it's lonely at the time.
Yeah, sometimes it's lonely, you know?
Can I make a comment? And maybe I would second it, but we're proposing something that isn't going to change much in the next month or two or three or. We can always amend it or revoke it or steer it some other way, recombine it with something else, but I think as a framework for heading into the future, for planning purposes, again, I think we should allow this.
I agree.
But if those uses come along before our infrastructure can handle them or serve them, it's their own fault. It won't turn out well, but I guess advice on the side would be for them to just wait a little while. Or maybe build a road first, then build your bank.
Right. In my,
Yeah, that's the long view, so.
in my understanding, and I was not at all the planning commission meetings, but I was on a fly on the wall for some of them. Some of these uses are there because people were concerned that a Dollar General or similar store would come in.
We
And-
don't want to leave that gap.
Right, and so rather than leaving it wide open for Dollar General to come in, they basically said, hey, grocery, but provided it meets these rules. And I think that the rules, as they set them up for groceries, do fit in that area. The whole thing about, they can only be so big. The parking has to be behind the store. You have to have a certain percentage of fresh food. I mean, I think these are pretty well thought out.
I agree. I
Probably been
just
a
like to
year.
thank the folks who have worked on this for how many months now? On the planning?
Years, I believe.
At least a year on these.
Couple of years.
It's a long time. And so I share the same observation. I think trying to hit the sweet point and, if it's not perfect, it seems very good to me. And that it's not static at some point in the future. If there was a perceived need to change something, while it's not nimble, it could be changed again in a 1 or 2 year process. So if we're ready, I'd like to propose the motion. Pursuant to 24 VSA 4442, I move the Select Board approve the amended Gateway and Village residential / commercial zoning districts and associated updates to the Town of Richmond zoning regulation. This motion amends the following sections of the Richmond zoning regulation, sections 2.5.2, 3.1.1, 3.1.2, 3.2.1, 3.2.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5.1, 3.5.2, 3.6.1, 3.6.2, 3.7.1, 3.7.2, 3.8.1, 3.8.2, 3.9.1, 3.9.2, 3.10.1, 3.10.2, 4.5, 5.5, 6.1.2, 6.137, and the official zoning district map. Minor references related to the district name changes have been amended in the following additional sections. Table of contents, 2.1, 5.7.3, 5.7.4, 5.12.2, and index. In addition, the documents are accompanied by the required bylaw amendment reports, and final noticing was accomplished on May 21st, 2023 in the Burlington Free Press and posted per statute. These amendments shall be effective 21 days after adoption or June 26, 2023.
Sure, this is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Barr that, if not the longest in Select Board history, it's up there. To basically approve the amended Gateway and Village residential commercial zoning districts and updates to certain sections of the zoning regulations. This has been seconded by David Sander. Are there any other discussion points, comments to be made? Lisa?
Go ahead.
I would like to make one more comment. I too really appreciate the work that the Planning Commission has done on this, particularly the work around the language of the grocery store, small village scale. They really did some creative work to craft something that I think will work quite well and could be a model for other places. So I support this motion.
Lisa?
Yeah, like I was saying before, the future is going to reveal itself when it's ready. I don't know if we should compare these to future conditions at some point in the future, and when they become real. I don't know if we should set up some kind of a review process to regularly review our ordinances we've passed. And I guess I'd look to Virginia to see if that's a parallel thing we should do, or is it just putting on too much?
So every 8 years, we have a new town plan. And then the goal is to review the zoning ordinances after the new town plan to make sure that the ordinances are compatible. So it looks like it's probably going to take us the whole 8 years to review our zoning ordinances, but we're coming from a point pretty far back in terms of the last time they were really considered thoroughly. So I think they will be reviewed after each new iteration of the town plan or after new legislation is passed, for instance, like S100. There will be a period that all of them will be reviewed. So yes, it's a regular thing that the Planning Commission does.
I thought you'd have an answer.
Okay.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Fired eye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. Okay, so it is coming up. It's 9 minutes, it's 10 minutes till 9. We've had a lot to cover, a lot of stuff that was, not to be rushed through. From this point forward on the agenda, we have a number of relatively quick items. I know we all like to talk, myself more than just about anybody, but unless there's something really important to be brought out, maybe we could move a little faster. So I just would like to offer that, but it's up to members of the select board. Our next item on the agenda has to do with a grant of VTrans large-scale bicycle and pedestrian grant to pay for a sidewalk on Jericho Road from School Street to Southview Drive. Previous proposals for this sidewalk continued all the way up to Valley View. This would not include that. This would stop at Southview. The project cost would be $375,000. The grant would cover 80% of that. And the town match would be 20% or $75,000. We have not designated where that match money would come from. And we don't have to at this point because we're only applying for the grant. We're not saying thanks.
Right.
So if we are warm toward the idea of applying, there is a motion in the packet. If there's discussion about whether we should, by all means, the floor is open.
This is Bard. I'd like to move to apply for the VTrans large-scale bicycle and pedestrian grant for a sidewalk on Jericho Road from School Street to Southview Drive and to approve funding for the $75,000 match and to appoint Director of Planning and Zoning Keith Oborn as the grant program manager.
Okay, this is David. I will second.
And we've motioned second to apply for the VTrans large-scale bicycle and pedestrian grant for the sidewalk on Jericho Road. Is there discussion?
Yes, if this is approved and constructed, I would like to call it the Roger Brown Memorial Sidewalk.
Doesn't have to be dead first.
No, kill him first.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these questions come up. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda has to do with appointments to the Andrews Committee, Forest Committee. I'd like to call the select board's attention to the supplemental memo, which was sent out today. Did everybody get a copy of that?
I think so.
Okay, and there have been some question, given that there are certain seats open on the Andrews Community Forest Committee. One that would be wanted to fill an unexpired term till 2024 and 2 open terms. And it was left originally to us as to which candidates would be assigned to which. Pursuant to that, we got a suggestion from Nick Neveriski, who is the proposed chair, to appoint Caitlin Littlefield. This is at the top of the supplement memo, page 2, to have Caitlin Littlefield be a 3-year term as the recommendation from the Conservation Commission. And then to appoint Ian Stokes and Julian Portilla to 3-year terms, and then to appoint Nick Neveriski to the midterm replacement for a term that will expire in 2024. So that's their proposed distribution of the seats. Are there any questions or comments about this?
What about Leanna? Did she fit in there somewhere? I'm looking back at her. Leanna,
I don't see her name. I will.
I'm sorry, who?
Leanna Schneidman, I'd seen her application here. but
Yes.
I forget what it was
Do you
for. I
want-
thought it was for-
No, you do it.
Okay, so the names that were put forward, so the way this committee works is the Energy Community Forest Committee actually puts forward names to the select board for consideration, and those are the names for appointment that the board can approve. I think I put her
Mhm.
application in the packet because she had also expressed interest.
Mhm.
So I wanted the board to be
Oh.
aware of that, but tonight, the only names you can act on are the ones that were put forward by the
Okay.
committee.
And for what it's worth, and I'm in no position to tell the Trails Committee what to do, but there is the seat that would be the recommendation of the Trails Committee. And it's conceivably possible the right conversations are held that she could be their nominee. I don't
Okay.
know though.
Oh, That's fine.
Okay, so
Just wanna
there,
Make sure she didn't get
yeah,
overlooked.
it's a good point to bring out. Is there any other discussion? Okay, there are three motions at the top of page 2 of the supplemental memorandum, if anybody would like to make them.
Jay, this is David. I move to appoint Caitlin Littlefield to a 3-year term on the Andrews Community Forest Committee as the recommendation from the Conservation Commission.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from David Sanders, seconded by Lisa Miller to appoint Caitlin Littlefield to a 3-year term on the ACF committee as the Conservation Commission recommendation. Is there discussion? Seeing none, please take your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we have a second motion. If I would like to make that would be to appoint Ian and Julian if you wish to make that motion.
Jay, this is David. I move to appoint Ian Stokes and Julian Portilla to 3-year terms on the Andrews Community Forest Committee.
This is Bart, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion from David Sanders, second from Bart Hill to appoint Ian Stokes and Julian Portilla to 3-year terms on the ACF committee. Okay, seeing no discussion, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. And then we have a last one to do Nick.
I move to appoint Nick Naversky as a midterm replacement for a term that will expire in 2024.
Lisa, was that a second? Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, second from Lisa Miller to appoint Nick Naversky to a midterm replacement for a term that will expire in 2024. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. Our next agenda item has to do with this is fairly unprecedented, the contentious race for tree warden. Unlike some of our volunteer positions in town, statute specifically says tree warden and deputy tree warden. It's not a position that two people can share, as is the case with the Waiver of Coal. Matt Leonetti, who is our current tree warden, has graciously offered to be the deputy, with Caitlin Littlefield, who is, if you know her, eminently experienced in this field. I can't think of somebody in town who knows more than she.
She'll keep those trees in line.
Oh,
Yeah. She's done heroic work on Emerald Ash Borer topic and a lot of work on the ACF committee. So Matt and her suggestion would be for Caitlin to be the tree warden, Matt to be the deputy. So that would require,
Make a suggestion, the caper toss. You know what that is?
we would have, I do know what it is, but I don't know where we're gonna get a caber. I guess we could use a telephone pole.
Same difference, yeah.
Okay, so would anybody like to make any motions to this effect?
So could you make it one motion?
I don't see why not.
Sure.
Okay,
I move to appoint Caitlin Littlefield to a 1-year term as tree warden and to appoint Matt Leonetti to a 1-year term as deputy tree warden. This is David. I will second that.
okay, we have a motion to appoint Caitlin as tree warden and Matt Leonetti as deputy, seconded by David, made by Jeff Ford, seconded by David Sander. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, and Judy has offered a message in the chat, which we could read. She says, thank you for acknowledging Caitlin's superlative work on Emerald Ash Borer in Richmond. All right, we are greatly in her debt and of course in your debt too as state entomologist. Okay, our next agenda item is one that we probably do not want to rush through, in my opinion. It has to do with Umiak Outfitters wish to,
No, we're a little tots.
oh, it's next in the supplemental memo, sorry.
Right.
The fact that it's next in the supplemental memo does not mean it's next. Thank you. Our next item is something that is probably quick. Consideration of a request to close Farr Road on June 30th from 3 to 5 p.m. for Little Tots Academy graduation. There is detail about this in the memo. It would require a 2-hour closure of a very short stretch of a not very heavily traveled road. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about that?
Yeah, I do have
Go ahead.
question about this. So the two businesses that are affected on are Sterling House. Is that it? It's just the Sterling House?
So I think that they're gonna do the closure beyond those driveways so that people would still have access into Sterling
machine.
House and the Random Machine. And then they would just close off the area beyond that driveway to the end of Farr Road. And I think part of Jason's idea here is that they want to limit traffic going through there and also allow cars to come in and sort of park on both sides of the road to allow space for graduation. And they've had concerns when they've had like a heavy day at pickup where they've had parking on both sides of the road. So they want to avoid that, knowing that all of the people are going to be there. So I think they're trying to actually make the situation better with this request.
And have Sterling House and Man Machine been notified of it?
I don't know if they've been notified, but I'll let Jason know to notify them that it'll be happening if it gets approved.
Okay, and this is for what date? It's the end of the month,
Friday
right?
the
June
30th.
30th.
Does it affect Pete Gosselin? No.
No,
It is a
Good
Friday.
alternate.
yeah, he's just a straight shot down Thompson Road. He
Oh,
doesn't
yeah,
need to be on
okay,
Farr
not
Road.
far, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so if Man and Machine or Sterling House has concern, I would hope that they would bring it to us at our next meeting, which will be before this event.
Yes, true.
Jay, this is David. I moved to close Farr Road on June 30th, 2023 from 3 to 5 p.m. to accommodate the Little Tots Academy graduation.
I'll second.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
have one suggestion, just because that, as it reads, suggests we close the entire road
Hmm.
versus the section specific from Sterling House to Thompson. Road.
Yeah, I think.
So would it make sense to modify the motion
Yeah.
to clarify the location?
Okay. Is that it?
I'll accept.
Okay, so that David and,
So
okay.
then
Okay, so we have a motion to close Farr Road from Sterling House to Thompson Road on June 30th, 2023, from 3 to 5 p.m. to accommodate Little Tots Academy graduation, made by David Sanders, seconded by Lisa Miller. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next agenda item is detailed in your packet. It is for the RUT Fest trail running event, which people tend to get a little skittish about closing roads for running events, but if you have looked at the packet, this would be closure of a very, actually, it's not even really truly a
There's no
closure.
closures.
There's no closure. It's just basically letting you aware that for at intervals on one day, there will be periodically runners going down a particular stretch of road.
And using some town trails. So it's really an approval to hold the event on town trails and run on the roads, but there's no need to close it. The nature of this event is it strings out really far. It's like a 50-mile race. So you get 5 miles into this, you don't have big clumps of people like you would see in a 5K. They did it last year and I didn't receive any negative feedback on the event from last year.
Un maestro.
June, was that you? June's box lit up, but she didn't
Oh,
say
I'm
anything.
sorry.
Is there any further discussion? Would somebody like to make a motion? Halfway down page 6 of the memo.
Oh, I'm in the wrong screen. Somebody else do it.
So this is Bard. I move to approve the RUTFest trail running event as presented to be held on July 8th, 2023, with the rain date of July 15th, 2023.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
We have a motion from Bard, seconded by David, to approve the RUTFest trail running event on July 8th, 2023.
We can vote.
Yeah, we can vote.
Okay,
Go
Lisa,
ahead.
I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay. Okay, our next item is to review the Recreation Committee's updates to the Recreation Committee webpage. Who do we, Sherry Lynn was here. Is she still here? Oh, there
I'm
she
here.
is. Sherry, go ahead. Please tell us about and show us the Recreation Committee page.
Sure. Sorry, my dog just started barking. Tony, sit down. Sometimes when I talk, she does that. So thank you all for inviting us here. And Kate Kreider is the co-chair, but she was unable to make it today. But what we've done is we've been working on this for, a few months now. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. And we looked at several different other town websites, and we really talked about, making it user friendly, simple. And, we have our, my dog is being so naughty right now. We have our statement about, we're targeting this for all the residents of Richmond, Bolton, and Huntington, so they can locate recreational offerings that the communities offer, programs and activities. So these are kind of the 3 categories or 5 categories we came up with. And we're just plugging in simple lists to start with about places and things people can do in the area. This one's really short and sweet. Thank you for showing that. And, we've got a little bit of a broader category for community recreation. We're trying to link to some of the other parts of the website. So for instance, Jay, you had talked about the parking. And so we've added that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because, that's a problem where people are parking in the wrong location. We also connected the senior center, because there's a lot of activities listed there. The libraries, very broad scope of, we're talking about physical activities, but also, of course, the library and other kind of art. I forgot the name of the art place, art space. Other places that people would go to, check out different activities that are, really free to everyone, or maybe a nominal fee. And then the forest recreation, everyone's got that, all 3 towns. So it's got, various links to websites where you can get trail maps and just general information about hiking and biking and things like that, long trail. And we put in a winter sports section. If you want to click to that, I think that winter or water, some of it doesn't have a lot, but that's okay. We don't want to inundate people with too much information because they won't even see it. So we tried to keep it simple with bullets. And, we are going to be talking about it tomorrow. We meet on Tuesdays, the first Tuesdays. And so we have a little bit more of a discussion with, some areas we weren't sure what to do with when we made our original list. So one of the things that we were thinking about is, a lot of this stuff is all, kind of public space or activities that the towns offer. We are thinking that it might be important to list businesses that have opportunities for programs for a fee, but not that we would link it to any of their websites, but just kind of, like an example might be Cochran's ski area, which, they do a lot for the community, but we don't quite know where we're going to land on that, but that is one area that we thought we would discuss on whether or not to at least list some businesses in the area that provide activities. And so that's where we're at.
Sherry Lynn, thank you. You anticipated, Jeff had said, what about Cochran's? And you went right to that.
Yeah, we're kind of still struggling with it, but it certainly makes sense. So we are having a meeting tomorrow, and there's other businesses too. I mean, I can kind of, we kind of brainstormed a list. Let me just run through them right now to get your feedback. Where is my list? Hang on.
I think Umiak was one of them. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is what we're thinking about. Farrs, Farm, Sunflower Maze, Cochran's, Vermont Youth Conservation Corp., Umiak, Sleepy Hollow, Birds of Vermont Museum, Bolton Valley, Twin Hills, Allison's Aquatics, and New Moon. And one of the things that I was gonna suggest to the group is maybe the way, I don't like the idea of putting the websites on because people can find them anyways, but I think maybe a disclaimer on the website that this is not an exhaustive list. Businesses can, submit a contact form if they want to be, considered to add to the website. So I don't know. It's an area we don't quite know what to do.
So
So
some discussion to be still held. Great.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anybody here so what time is the meeting tomorrow?
It's at 7 to 8:30.
Okay, and that's going to be on Zoom, and is there an
Yep.
in-person?
Yeah, Kate's trying to go there. Duncan can't make it and I can't make it because I'm without a car, but I think Kate's gonna be there in person, but
Okay.
it's on the website, yeah.
Okay, so
So-
people who would like to weigh in on this tomorrow,
Yeah,
7
that'd be
p.m.
great.
I have one random comment. This is Bard. I didn't
Yes.
see Mansfield United Soccer Club there.
Oh, let me write that down.
Great.
Thank you very much. Is that a youth thing or something else?
Yeah, it's a youth thing. It used to be Camel Pump Soccer Club and there was one in Jericho and they merged. It's now Mansfield United Soccer Club. Youth soccer in Vermont evolves over time. in terms of time.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. If anyone has any other ideas, because we all tried to put our heads together, but we obviously missed one. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sherilyn. There's no vote needed on that, but we give you our thanks for your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next agenda item is one that I almost forgot to have added. It has to do with Juneteenth. We, starting, I guess, back in 2020, have been allowing the Black Lives Matter flag and sign to be at the town offices and flying. The flag is now flying from the park, I believe, right?
That's correct.
What places? Okay, but we historically get questions from townsfolk going, under what color of authority are we doing this? And so I thought it was important to simply, mention we do have the resolutions authorizing this in the packet, but essentially the people who put the flags up and the sign up do have our permission. And if you want to go ahead and share that. Make that bigger if you. Okay, so this is at the top says amendment because we did tighten it up a little bit. You'll notice that the phrase for a period of 3 months is in there. I believe that had been an original oversight. But Black Lives flag, Black Lives Matter sign, starting on Juneteenth and up for 3 months. So there's no vote needed on this. This has already been held as a continuing item. It's just to let people know this will be happening. The other reason to bring this up has to do with our next scheduled select board meeting. Our next meeting would be in 2 weeks, which would be on Juneteenth. And we have a couple of options. We could, Josh said in the memo, I think, that this is not a town holiday, but we gave it as a floating holiday, right?
We never closed the conversation on that.
Okay,
It's a federal holiday. right?
It's a federal holiday, but
oh,
yeah,
but
we haven't assigned it as a town holiday.
so what are people's thoughts? Is that and Bard mentioned this at the Water and Sewer Committee, that the Water and Sewer Committee and our committee, since we share 3 members, we'd like to be on the same page, delay or not. So what do y'all think about, should we meet the night of the 19th or should we put it off for a day?
What did the
It's
water?
scheduled for the 20th.
We kicked it down the road to us.
Oh. We felt it was way too big a decision for us to make, so we thought.
Wait. What's the downside?
Well, if people have conflicts on Tuesday, that could be an issue. I personally think it's an okay idea. I have no
personally think
objection to it. People might have conflicts here on the Tuesdays. I wouldn't want to move to Tuesday and then discommode people, but if you
okay.
don't have any conflicts, I think it's a fine idea,
How
but
about a meeting on each day and spread some of the stuff out a little bit? Just throwing it out there. I know.
The worst of both worlds.
So does any member of the select board know at this time of a reason that it would be awkward to meet on Tuesday?
I don't have a problem with that.
I'm retired.
Okay with them.
So would anybody like to make a motion to have our next meeting on the 19th, on the 20th?
So. Okay, I'll second it.
We have a motion from David Sanders, second from Jeff Ford, to move the select board's next meeting and implicitly the Water and Sewer Commission's next meeting to the night of Tuesday, June 20th. Please take your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Yeah, bye. David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. Okay, our next item has to do with our police chief hiring process. There's a lot of confusion in the community about our hiring process. Some people have referred to it publicly as our failed hiring process. And I want to stress to members of the public who are listening or watching this later, we had actually an extremely successful hiring process up to this point. As Bard or Josh can tell us, there were some very good candidates. We offered public forums to our two leading candidates. One accepted, one did not. The one who did accept the public forum subsequently withdrew, but the person who was our other leading candidate has subsequently put his name back in the ring. And we, I believe, have actually already begun the background check.
Yeah, so I've been in conversation with him about moving forward on a background check. We're working on that right now. Prior to moving forward to an interview with first responders and public forum.
And Bard, please.
So just a comment. So the hiring committee that was created, and there were two, partly Lisa, is for your benefit, June Heston and I were members of that hiring committee that serves as an advisory committee to Josh as the hiring manager and supervisor. And we got, I don't know, 15 or 20, it feels like it was close to 20 applications, went through them all, rated them, came up with a couple of candidates who were pretty highly rated or quite highly rated, rose to the top. And Dan, who is now withdrawn. And there are one or two others who also ranked very highly. So we're still sort of in that process, even though it's been sort of awkward given the dynamics of the process. But I guess that's a safe description.
And it's not for me to say any details about the second candidate, except that I have not met the man, but I know his name. I've looked him up. I am impressed and pleased that somebody of that person's caliber would be willing to come work for us. This is a person who has a great deal of experience and would be a great mentor should he choose to come be our chief.
One other comment I'll make, and this was an overt discussion at the beginning of the process, as we were also engaged in discussions with Heinsberg about what I think is a medium to long-term possibility of the joint departments, which essentially requires sort of a municipal entity to oversee a shared department as opposed to one town or the other, or just an informal arrangement. Because when we get into things about policy, and there are lots of police policies, that the ownership of that, if it's representing two towns, then belongs to the two towns. So that was the conversation that we started. And we overtly said that part of the recruitment and hiring process, that's a consideration. We were looking for a skill set of the candidates that they were able and willing to engage in that planning process, and that could impact their jobs, their employment, the structure of the department over time. That seemed like a safe description.
Yep.
And if I could ask June if she has anything to add, because she's been involved in this along the way as well, and is calling in from the road with Ruby.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, there's lights in the background. I think that's a pretty thorough description of what's been happening so far. And I think that it's important to note that this committee is serving as advisory, as Bard said, to Josh, and have made recommendations that Josh has definitely followed up on.
Any comments regarding the hiring process for members of the select board? Okay, Jeff?
So, one of the challenges, I've had a number of challenges and concerns about this process from the get-go, and I think I've expressed them before. You know, there was, you know, some disagreement about which process we should be doing first. Whether we should be doing a hiring process first, or whether we should be trying to understand what it is what we want out of a police chief. What are the qualities we want in an individual, and what do we want as services as a town? Which I don't believe that we've had that conversation yet. One of the reasons that the last candidate withdrew, it was because he said he had concerns about this collaboration with the neighboring town. That was in his withdrawal letter that he posted on Front Porch Forum. And one of the concerns that I have is that, you know, I don't have the benefit that you have, Jay, of seeing any information about this individual at all. And I didn't learn about the last candidate until I read about it in Front Porch Forum, which is a concern for me. You know, while I understand that it's Josh's decision and that the committee is an advisory to Josh, I would hope that we too would be advisory to Josh in this process, as we are the elected officials. You're the only one now on the committee board that's elected, and elected officials represent the town, you know, our residents, and, you know, I think should have some advisory capacity as well, whether it be statutory or political. So that's my concern. My concern is that I do feel that this process has been somewhat opaque, at least it has been to me, because I haven't had the benefit of the committee. And I would like to have more understanding about it as it happens. You know, it may be moot now. I don't know. You know, the process may have moved forward. I would have liked to have had a conversation about that at the select board level before we move forward. But I understand that it has gone forward. And I think, you know, I know that I'm not the only one that shares these concerns. So what I fear is that we put whoever we put into this position at a disadvantage if there's not full support, you know, whether from the select board as a whole or listening to concerns from the public. So I wish that there had been a more open discussion about what, not necessarily who, but what we want out of a police chief and what we want as services in town. And, you know, I think I've said this in the past, I don't see an urgency at the moment. Right now, we have more coverage today than this week than we've had in the past 2 years with contracted services with Heinsberg, which I am grateful for. You know, I'm grateful that we have people patrolling on Cochrane Road and able to respond to calls, which it has been very, very difficult over the past 2, 3, 4 years. And I would point out that we've gone through 4 of these processes in the last 5 years. So what we've had 4 police chiefs in the last 5 years. So whatever we're doing.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that.
It hasn't seemed to be been working.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that because I firmly disagree with the narrative that some people are spreading of 4 failed processes. Chief Muldoon left us because his partner moved to the Pacific Northwest. That does not count as a failure. We then had our next hiring process at a very particular time, relatively close to George Floyd's death, when very few people were very interested and people were discussing whether they should even leave the police profession. Also, it was during when COVID was much more, when the pandemic was still raging. At that time, we did not get the same caliber of candidates we got this time. I do not call it a failed process, just because when we put our listing out, we did not get our door knocked down. The process was not failed. It just happened to be happening at a time in our society when we were unlikely to get good candidates. Now, the next one, Chief Ben, we would have gone to a hiring process sooner. However, town of Heinsberg met with us right here in this room, and were very warm about the idea of exploring a joint district. Within 1 week after that, they informed us, nah, never mind. We're going to do a lengthy study on this topic. We'll get back to you. And then, of course, we're interviewed in the newspaper and said it was Richmond's fault. Okay. So had we known that Heinsberg was going to do that, we would probably have moved on to a formal search much sooner. This hiring process, I think, has gone extremely well. And I don't think that we need to stop and say, gee, what are we doing wrong? We're not doing anything wrong. Muldoon left for a very good reason. Kyle left for not a terribly good reason. And he was not the best possible candidate out here. He's the best of what we could get. We would have gone to a hiring process sooner, but for what Heinsberg did. And now we're in a hiring process that I think has been very diligent. The one thing I will agree with Jeff on is it is awkward when, as a select board member, you find out the name of your potential chief from Front Porch Forum. It would be nice to have that shared more openly with the select board. The last thing I'd like to say is, as far as the hiring power of this position, it's in our charter, which would require a state law and an action by the legislature to change who hires our police chiefs. When we hire a town manager, we are hiring him for his knowledge, his diligence, his expertise. This is one of those areas. He takes our advice, and he has really, the people on the committee alone, I think he did a very good job of organizing the committee. He reached out to a lot of sectors of society, including Richmond racial equity. And I think that you guys did a great job getting candidates. I have not seen all their names, but the ones I've seen look great. So instead of saying, what are we doing wrong? We're not doing anything wrong. Timing has been against us at least once with COVID and George Floyd. And timing has been against us a second time when Heinsberg pulled the rug out from under us, which there's no dispute that they did. So I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised and pleased if the candidate that we're currently in operations and discussions with does wind up coming up here for a forum. I honestly think we could look a long time before we'd find somebody his equal. And June Heston has personally told me that she thinks he's amazing. And June has more police experience in her little finger than I have in my entire body. If she says he's great, I'm willing to believe that.
I just want to say I have zero police experience, but I have some knowledge. So, and I do think that we didn't have 19 applicants for the position, and we narrowed it down, through a process that was really defined first by Paco years ago, and then this committee making sure that we were hearing everyone's voices, including having the director of the CJC on the hiring committee. She did have to step down due to personal reasons, and so she didn't follow through on that search. But I would agree with Jay that it's not a failed process, and unfortunately it probably does feel opaque, to use Jeff's word, because we hadn't gotten to the public forum. But the process is really set up to be transparent. And I believe when the name went out on the website, that's how people about the hiring process, that's how people found out who the last candidate was. And so I want Josh to speak to that. So it was put out for everyone to see when we were moving forward with that candidate.
Right, yeah, I did put it out to everybody sort of at the same time. I didn't email the select board separately to say, here's what I'm going to do in an hour or the next day. I could change that certainly with the next one. That's communication issue that I apologize for. I guess I will just talking to the process. kind of going back to when Kyle left, we did take a pause and we actually talked with Heinrich for more about 6 months about whether we would want to join with them. We got a lot of feedback from Vermont League of Cities and Towns and Trevor Whipple, who's their law enforcement expert, and through those conversations, and didn't decide to go out to hire a chief until I think it was about December, when Heinsberg said, actually, we're going to do this study and it's going to be 6 months. And then we talked with the board on, I think, at least 2, if not 3 occasions before we decided, let's move forward with the chief hiring process. So that's where we went to, what we did. And to speak to what June said, the process that's in place, I didn't create this process. I won't take credit for it. Paco Almond, our interim director of police services in 2018, when we were going through a similar process as a town, looking at what do we want from policing. I believe the summer of 2018 was largely spent by 2 select board members receiving feedback from the town about what community policing means. Do we want to have a police force in town? Do we want to outsource it, contract? At the end of that process, with help of Paco, it was determined we do want to have a police force in town. We want to have community policing. So Paco put together this process. When I showed it to VLCT, they said it was one of the most transparent, publicly involved processes that they've seen. They really appreciated the process. With the public forum, with the 2 candidates at the end, they thought that was, a really great way, as well as building the committee together with that. And as recently as I think it was last week or the week prior, VLCT referred Winooski to me to talk about our process, because they're going to be soon looking for a new chief. I think their chief is retiring. So I spoke with their town manager about, the pros and the cons of the process. But I think the process has been, appreciated by VLCT and others that are looking to hire a chief.
Jay, can I say something?
Let's do.
I'm one of those people that thought we had a failed process. I haven't said that publicly, but
Mhm.
I've said it to you and I've said it to the board. And I guess I still see that it has failed to provide what we want for a bunch of reasons I didn't realize until tonight. But I still feel that it is not transparent to the board.
No, I think Josh has agreed that there should be more communication with the board.
And that's going to cause a problem with
Mhm.
me, because if I find out outside or from, in kind of informal conversations that that's happened, I have a whole bunch of questions all of a sudden, and they don't get answered either. The other thing is our messaging. Josh, I brought up messaging some months ago. As a resident here, I still feel that we could do a better job of getting out in front of the news, getting out in front of the gossip with messaging, however simple or vague it might be. Is here's what we're going to do in the next few months. I don't see anything happening like that. I think it might help. When people are prepared to hear something, they usually hear what you say better.
Mhm.
And I'd like us to just think about that as a group. And
Lisa,
shouldn't all be on Josh, shouldn't all be on Jay.
no, I think that's a good point, Lisa. One of the things that I err on the side of personally is liking to hear myself talk or see myself in front porch forum. There have been times that I've probably driven people crazy by posting the same announcement about something 4 times, just because I'm hell bent on people noticing it. That's at times easy for me to do because I don't really understand the concept of free time or resting. But Josh has a lot on his plate, but I think we can all agree that if we work together, we probably could make a list of topics on which better communication could take place, and even say, Bard, would you be willing to write a Front Porch Forum issue article on this? Lisa, would you be willing to write something on this? But just as topics come up that you think, you don't have to have it fully formed in your mind, but you could just say, this is a topic that I think a timely public announcement would be helpful. Let us know, because sometimes you will see a need, or Jeff will see a need, or David will see a need for an announcement that we might have thought, oh no, everybody knows that. That this is why we don't have a dictator. We have 5 people on the select board, because we need 5 different points of view.
Good. Yeah, and I do not want to launch on Front Porch Forum and then find out, ooh, I shouldn't have done that.
Right, it's embarrassing as hell if you walk into.
Yeah, it is.
The perfect storm is walking into the market and having somebody come up to you and ask you about the new police chief candidate, and you've never heard of them.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's what we want to avoid at all
Exactly.
costs.
Yeah. And I don't know if you should call that messaging or just maybe coordination.
Coordination is part of it, but I think our townspeople, given that through whatever weird mechanism, Front Porch Forum seems to be the paper of record, although not in the legal sense, we could also possibly the police department has a Facebook page. I don't know if the town actually does as
I
such.
don't have a Facebook page.
But-
How
but-
about- How about Truth Social?
Don't even go there. But, you know, I'll give you an example of something that, communication will be necessary on. We know that due to the unavailability of ladders, we were not able to, get to all the police
You don't want to write that for him.
speed cameras.
You don't want to.
And because our police are very busy, it's not always been easy to turn the speed data around in the monthly fashion that people would like. I have the key. I have the software that you use to download the data. I need to get the right cable to connect to them. But that's actually on me now to go around and download from our 7 speed cameras that data, because our townspeople want to know what's going on with that.
Sure, yeah.
And so,
I'll help too, if I can. I mean, you know, I got.
Yeah,
a ladder.
right. But I'm being flippant about that. But the point
I
is,
think we
these
solved the
are,
latter problem, actually.
these are things, these are things that the townspeople clearly care a great deal about.
Mhm.
It may seem to us to be just, oh, that speed camera thing.
Well, they're
But to
really
them, it's-
simple and they seem simple. They may not be.
But
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 they
the
seem-
thing is, what seems to us to be simple or something that we've talked to death, just somebody who doesn't come to these meetings, you've got to get out in front of that.
Mhm.
And I think that's an important message to remember. You know, what's the old phrase? What's the best antiseptic? Sunshine.
Oh, yeah.
So, an example of what would have been helpful is when it was announced that we were reconstituting the search committee, is to explain who was on that search committee. Because, that it was originally constituted, 4 or 5 months ago, right? And I don't know who's on the search committee. It's my understanding that Krista Lee from the Community Justice Center was originally appointed, and then she had to step down for health reasons, but that she's back to work now. Was she on the committee to select a second candidate?
Well, they'd already been selected.
So the way it
Well,
works, just to be clear, so first, not everybody is privy to this. So the principle of HR is generally, you know what you need to know. So the hiring committee saw all of the resumes of everybody. And then when it comes to the hiring manager, then there's the follow-up on who's going to make it through the interview process. They get invited for an interview. There was internal interview and first responder interview. And if I recall correctly, we talked about this process, Lisa, before you joined us, like what the general overview was.
Yeah, I haven't heard it.
Arguably, we could have done a better job at saying, this is what the process looks like and the timeline. But the candidates that were selected by the original committee. Josh called the committee back together again when the first person, the leading candidate left to talk about advice about what to do. But it was the same committee and the same constituents or members that I think we talked about
Yeah,
5 months ago.
and just to add a little bit more detail to that, we did have a timeline in January when we put together the committee and we put together the process. That was shared at a meeting here, I'm fairly certain of it, to look about, this is the benchmarks, these are the timelines, these are the spots on the committee. I believe we talked about who was appointed to the committee as well, and I think I posted it on the website. Krista Lee was involved up until, she backed out, she had to step down. We still had one meeting left of reviewing the matrix for evaluating candidates from the paperwork that they submitted, as well as interview questions. So we hadn't even released to the committee the names of the candidates at that point. So she didn't know any of the names of the candidates, hadn't seen any materials, didn't go through the interview process, was not involved in that. So when we reconvened, I felt it appropriate to keep it with the people that have been through that process and through that decision-making process to then get advice of, well, you've all seen the candidates, where should we go from here?
Right. And go ahead, Jeff.
So, this may seem like a detail, but between the time when we we started the chief process and the second time that we went through it, a lot has changed. We have initiated a contract with Heinsberg, which was willing to contract with us, for the past 6 months to a year. They did not withdraw from their willingness to contract with us. And times have changed, and we have yet to have a public conversation about what we want our police department to do. You know, what qualities was the whole reason that Richmond Racial Equity formed was to talk about what qualities of our police people do we want and what kind of policing can we have? All due respect for June's experience or her next to experience is with state troopers. That's a really different thing than community policing in a small rural town.
I think
You know.
June's about to correct you on that.
Well, you know, all I'm saying is that, you know, and it's all due respect, June. I respect you greatly. But we can disagree on this. And I think the place to discuss it is what we want is in a public meeting with elected officials. This is what we do. We represent, you know, and believe me, I'm not speaking just for myself.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'd welcome an agenda item before or after we hire the next chief of where we discuss policing. What kind of policing do we want?
Mhm.
You know, because there are lots of different flavors. You know, there's a lot of different flavors of police departments out there. And we are not Burlington. We are not South Burlington. We are not state police. And we're not military. You know, we're a small rural town. So
Bard, then
I'll leave
June.
it at that.
So I will just say we had an overt conversation about looking for that character and skill set in a police chief. We had a very overt, concrete conversation that what we want to engage in that process is not just a town manager and select board, but a department head.
Mhm.
And that has to do with the skill set and knowledge set of a chief. Because for better or worse, the statutes and regulations around police management and police supervision are really embedded in police certification. And so it's something you can't entirely ignore as we move forward with the police department. Like if we were doing water sewer, you don't want the sewer commission replacing the pumps in the wastewater treatment plant.
Although it may come to that.
It has come close to late. It's sort of the skill set, and what you hope for in a department head is the management skills, and that's what we were looking for, the management skills that included exactly the things you're talking about, strategic planning. What does the town want for police services? And then also help to engage and I think we will resurrect the conversation with Heinsberg, at least that's my opinion, about a partnership. But as an equal partnership, you know, we're similar sized towns. And so how do you create an entity that manages a shared police department with shared sort of oversight, control, and financial management? And that's a sort of, it's really simple in concept, but really challenging in execution. So I guess I'll close with that.
Okay, and we do have other things on the agenda, but I would like to give June one last chance to say whatever she wanted to say. You're muted
Can't hear.
still.
Sorry about that. I think my experience with the law enforcement world is less relevant to this conversation than the process. And I think that when the select board appointed me to this hiring committee, it was because of some of the experience that I have. But I think what's most important to remember here is that we have a process that was identified years ago and that we have been trying to follow. And I think that, yeah, we could, you know, we could look at changing that, but Bard made a lot of really good points of, you know, policing. There are certain requirements of policing. And Jeff, I hear you in saying that the Richmond Racial Equity, you know, what they want to see in policing, but they're not the only group that has a say in this. This is a community department. And I think until we get to the point of the process of a public forum, it won't be all the voices. Like we have, and everyone's invited to participate in that. And so I hope that as we move forward, we can at least get to that point.
I thank everybody who's weighed in tonight and those of you watching at home. And everybody who has sent me emails and talked to me in the market, and all of you for doing the same with my fellows here. Our next agenda item has to do with, now we can get to it, with Umiak, which has,
No,
No,
Police Union.
oh God, I want to get to that so badly. Okay.
So you're really looking for it.
Maybe we should switch them because Steve is from Umiak and waiting for this topic.
Right, and I was going to propose, also, it's a short thing, but we do have people from the land trust here. So I would propose, given what you said, that maybe we should move Umiak next, Gillett Pond next, and then finish with the rest. Is that okay with people?
Yeah.
Okay, so Umiak, Josh, would you like to?
Sure. So Umiak came before the board a few months ago to request permission to install a ladder at Overrockers, and the ladder would be to assist tubers who would be renting tubes and tubing trips from Umiak to exit the river, to get back up onto the bank, to walk a trail, to get over to Overrockers where their cars were parked. The board was in favor of moving forward in that process, which involved going to the Development Review Board for approval. So Umiak went to DRB, got approval for installation of the ladder. But the board did say that before the ladder could be installed on town property, there needed to be an agreement set up with Umiak about the ladder, and discussion about the route and where they would be dropping people off. So we had our attorney drop an agreement that outlined liability on the ladder and rules on the ladder. Umiak made a few changes to that, primarily to limit their liability to only Umiak customers, and proposed roping it off when they didn't have a tour going on, to limit their liability so that nobody would go on the ladder who wasn't one of their customers. We reached out to VLCT Passive, who is our insurer, for advice. And I sent that here this morning to the board. I don't know if everybody had a chance to see it, but got some feedback as late as this morning from VLCT that they would advise not signing the revised agreement and keeping, if the ladder is going to be there, keeping it with anybody who might be injured on the ladder, the responsibility of Umiak. So I think that brings us up to speed with where we're at now. I know we have Steve here from Umiak, and I think there's probably going to be some talk about trails and use of trails in the forest once tubing starts.
I was only going to say responsibility. I think we mean liability.
Liability. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so Steve, would you?
Right, and I'm Stephen Brownlee, Umiak Outfitters. And yes, Josh, we submitted a proposal agreement, went to my lawyer and insurance company and said, hey, we were requested from you folks, can we add the liability of the general public to our policy? And although we are able to list the town of Richmond as an additional insured for our clients and any incidents, our coverage will not at all cover general public. And there's, I sort of went around a number of times with our insurance company and I said, no, there's no way that we can write a policy that would do that for the general public. They recommended that that be something that the town would cover. We can close the ladder off and rope it off and say it's for customers only and use it, have it closed basically when we're not there supervising it.
Okay, so the issue is that the town, this is not something the town has asked for or wanted. And so we're not going to take on the liability of something that doesn't really benefit us at all. There's no way our attorney would never sign off or encourage us to sign off on an agreement that says this thing that no one's watching a lot of the day, if somebody gets hurt, it's on us. We can't sign that. And so if your attorney won't let you take on that liability and ours won't let us take on the liability, I think we're at an impasse.
Okay. So we go back to no ladder and continue with the way we've done it without a ladder.
Yeah, which is leading to degradation of the shore. So, I mean, it's got impact also, which is again caused by the clients. So, the town isn't causing that. So there's an imbalance here, I guess, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah.
I know that'll come up then. So,
We want to give John a chance.
Sure.
John, did you have some questions you wanted to ask?
You need to come up if you do.
I guess,
Oh.
Mike. Hi, John Cart, Richmond resident, and only spent a good, the last dozen years or so, at least 100 hours wandering around that parcel of the town. I mean,
We could have gotten you a map.
yeah. Thank you, yeah. You know, for what it's worth, a couple things. One, I mean, the riverbank changes every year, and I don't know if you've been out there in the last few weeks, but because there hasn't been a big high water this year, the bank is a rather gradual slope. After heavy winters, it's often vertical because the high water in the spring washes that away. But it's a rather gentle slope now. I mean, it's not a smooth, perfectly smooth, but I don't know that a ladder is needed this year. Whereas last year, I think everyone wanted such a thing. That parcel is the biggest contiguous piece of silver maple, ostrich fern, floodplain forest in Richmond. And Richmond has some of the best of that forest on the upper Winooski River. Taking care of that is really I mean, it's part of what makes Richmond special. It's why we've been working there for a dozen years or more, trying to keep it that way. So I just think any ad, it was okay. I got a bit antsy when the idea of expanding the parking lot there was proposed, but I let go of the fact that it's not just my spot. But I think any agreement that's going to bring more people there should be cognizant of impacts of trails, impacts of the bank, and the fact that brings more, more people means more garbage, more need for cleanup, more need for police.
Is there a way to grade that bank in a way that's walkable without?
Or use riprap?
Not really. I can't
Under the
picture.
rocks?
Well,
Then you get into,
Will it stay that way?
DEC regulations and that
Oh,
sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, right.
But that particular spot is less prone to erosion than just upriver because of the way, because it's on the inside edge of a bend.
Oh, the water
And
doesn't
so
get
the
it.
water isn't hammering it as directly as it is 100 yards upstream.
Yeah.
And that's why we chose the spot for that. And if I might add, John, I did see your letter to the board. I appreciate your thoughts on this, and Umiak is certainly in favor of working with all of the aspects that you had pointed out to the board, which was, Umiak cleaning up the site, which we would do anytime, any day that we were there. We'd have our staff, police as they finish up and take any trash that might have been left behind by our clients or by anybody else that happened to be there. We'd be happy to do that. You had mentioned that there is a trail system from the parking lot, that an existing path that, I don't know, fishermen, other users of the river have made straight back to where we're taking out. And we did not cut anything there, although I think there has been traffic, people taking the shortcut, so to speak. We are certainly happy to use the existing route that we applied for, and keep people off of that route that people have decided to take. We're also happy to have good signage and to put that signage in posts and not on trees. And we're also very happy to report any issues that of erosion or crash to the town manager. So those are all things that we want to work with the town. I think that, the real obstacle here is, the liability of steps to general public. And if there's, I'm open to other ways to work this. we're happy to donate the steps to the town and be a, if that helps. I'm not sure that is what you're looking for, but, I think that the steps do a good job of protecting the riverbank from further erosion. But if the liability of those steps is too much, we don't have to have those steps.
It seems apparent to me that this hybrid kind of doesn't work. A broad question, and John, maybe ask you, there are parts of there where we put in bridges like over the ravines and stuff, and the Trails Committee, I guess, does that work. Is it a good idea to have steps going down the bank to a heavily used, intermittently heavily used part for Umiak takeouts?
There's a few different ways to look at that. It probably reduces erosion, particularly like last year or other years when there was when the bank is steeper. The question is, if you put that in, I don't know if the town approves it, does the town have to follow ADA rules? Does that trigger other questions? Do we have to, I'm not sure where that, there's the bureaucratic side, there's the engineering side, there's the environmental side. You can probably get two or three of those fairly easily, but probably not all of them together.
Well, what if we did this? If we conclude, it doesn't seem like there's an obvious solution today, but what if we, if you talk about a partnership, Steve talks about a partnership. If Steve's willing to donate, Umiak's willing to donate the materials or cost, and ask the Trails Committee, do you think it's a good idea? And if so, would you install it with free materials? And ask the Trails Committee, and have that be fork in the road, so to speak?
But that still leaves open the question, who gets sued when somebody.
Well,
No, we do.
who gets sued when we already have structures in place
Okay,
along the trail?
Yeah.
They exist today.
so why is our attorney telling us to stay away from this?
Well,
Because they're.
it's a fair question because he's an attorney, but if you go, the one that was recently replaced, what is it, about 3 feet, maybe it's less than 4 feet wide, right?
Yeah.
It's not ADA compliant. Maybe it is ADA compliant, actually. If you could get your wheelchair there, it probably would fit a wheelchair.
There's no way you get your wheelchair there, I'm afraid.
And what about
On the raft, you sell, you rent? No.
Can they bring wheelchairs?
Yeah.
So my point, though, is we've already built and installed structures through a town sanctioned committee.
Yeah.
The reason we replaced it is the old one was falling apart.
Yeah.
And so if somebody had fallen off the old one as it rotted, are we liable? Presumably. I don't know.
So are
Is it
you
use at your own risk?
So are you arguing we're less exposed if we build it than if they build it?
I'm just proposing.
No, I'm just
like,
asking, I
if-
don't know.
If we treat the stairs the same way we treat the other structures, the very small number of trail structures that have been built by the Trails Committee and treated the same way.
Well, what about Johnny Brook, the Johnny Brook Trail? That's a pretty extensive.
That's a big one, right?
That's a pretty, do we own that?
I
It's a
actually
grant.
think the Youth Conservation Corps built that, didn't they?
But it's
Or
not,
did we have a contract?
No, I
that built
think
that?
Johnny Brook is Cross Vermont Trail.
Yeah,
And I don't know who built the original bridges, but Cross Vermont has maintained and kept them up.
but are
so
we liable?
whose liability is that?
Good question. So I think on this, I can follow up with our attorney and with the LCT passive to see if that would change their equation on this, if we owned the latter.
Well, see, this is an area where I'm going to subscribe to the Alice's Restaurant School of Management. And when you have two piles
Pile
of
of garbage to be talking about.
there's a big one down at the bottom, rather than pull that one up, let's throw the little one down, and it'll be one.
I can follow up and come back.
Big pile of garbage makes more sense.
But I mean, put it in the same
Yeah.
category as those other
Yeah.
trail improvements. Consider it a
Everybody knows
trail
what he's talking about.
improvement. And I think it was the Trails Committee that's built some of them. And so if the Trails Committee with some level of competence built this and maintained it in the same way.
So
is
how about if
that
we
viable?
we defer this to the Trails Committee to,
I'm okay with that.
yeah, work with Josh to work up a solution.
Okay,
And if we invite Steve back, let's put him at the front end of these.
quite all right.
We'll just have
It was
that's
interesting.
super
It's
interesting.
fascinating stuff.
I guess we could have taken it very first thing,
It
but
seemed to be little things.
Cannot tell a lie.
I put that on.
Now I'm hungry for mashed potatoes and turkey. Let's move on.
Okay,
It's giving dinner.
Sure.
Yes, I like your solution very much.
And it doesn't resolve the issue entirely, but it has maybe a possibility.
okay.
Steve, could I get your contact info? I've got
Sure.
got an idea. I mean, not for now, but just want to get your contact info to talk to you.
Yeah.
Off trail.
Okay.
I can leave that with you.
So we agreed to bring
Yep.
up the Gillett Pond Dam.
Yeah.
We have Judy Rosofsky from the Conservation Committee coming with us remotely and Wright Preston here in person. They're wanting us to basically authorize spending $50,000 more in the conservation fund to enable the dam to be built, right?
Yes. But I don't think we're looking for your approval tonight, because we need to go through the process.
You're
of
right.
Presenting it to the Conservation Commission with an application, which we'll be doing next week. So this is just to let you know, we're gonna come back before you within, probably at your next meeting, we hope. If you have a second, I'll just go over the budget and why there is a need for additional funding, and we're so close. So looking at the right-hand column, it's right-hand chart. On the right-hand side of the right-hand chart, we have a construction budget of that's been approved by J. McDonald of $770,000. We have additional engineering oversight work to do of, we think, around 40, and we put in a contingency of 40. So the total project for Gillett Pond Dam is $850. The next column to the left shows you that we have raised and available to us $748,000. We're a quick 100 short, and we are going to build the dam this summer. We will be looking for 50 from the Conservation Reserve Fund. We will be fundraising for the remaining 50. And a good local bank has provided a commitment to fund that $50,000 shortfall. So that's our goal. The construction will start in July. It's a very tight schedule to start in July and end by the 1st of October. So we're very excited. We're close, and we're now doing the final fundraising. That, again, when I'm looking for approval, I'm just.
This is an FYI. Okay.
An
but we'll
FYI
be
that
back.
we'll be back at your next meeting, hopefully if the Conservation Commission supports this request.
This is kind of pre-meeting.
Yep.
Will that longer discussion include any discussion of parking? I
I
just
was just
predicted.
gonna
It
ask.
certainly can. The engineering design includes a parking lot. I don't know if you've driven by and seen all of the trees cleared to the south of the dam. That's the parking lot, the future parking lot. It'll be the staging area for the construction of the dam.
Yeah,
And then it will be a gravel parking lot that it's designed for 6 cars, but it's much bigger than that. So it's, I don't know, it's 10 or 12.
Okay,
Yep.
sweet. Sounds good. Thanks, right? Thanks,
Thank
Judy.
you.
Okay, our next item, jumping back, is consideration of ratification of the agreement with New England Police Benevolent Association, Local 415, regarding temporary support from the Heinsberg Police Department, possible executive session.
Thanks, guys.
I don't know that we need an executive session, but if you want one, there are motions in the packet. Jeff, Josh, do you want to
Give a quick overview.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is the agreement. I think it's largely the same that we reviewed in the executive session a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago now. Which is the agreement with the union to essentially give the officers sort of first right of refusal or allow them to work additional overtime shifts so as not to reduce their hours or limit their hours because of the agreement with Heinsberg. It really just makes clear that Heinsberg is there to be supplemental to what can be covered by Richmond officers.
And for what it's worth, we do actually sort of kind of have a Richmond officer right now. Have we told them that?
Yeah, so we do, so let me give some more context on that too. So I talked with Officer Kevin Wilson, who's currently on orders from the Army National Guard. He's doing training actually over in Camp Johnson. His schedule is where he's 23 days on. I think that might be changing to 30 days on, and then he gets 5 days off. He does have some leave time coming up in June. I think he's got 2 to 3 weeks of scheduled leave time. He said that during that leave time, he would look into seeing what he can do to fill in some hours for us here in Richmond. He will also try to work in some hours on his leave time and potentially some overnight on-call hours if we wanted that, because he sometimes sleeps over near Camp Johnson, so he's actually fairly close. So I met with him last week about that. He's going to give me a schedule of what he thinks he can do for June and July. So I'll be factoring that in our conversations with Heinsberg for coverage.
So as Josh said, this is basically ratifying the agreement we saw 3 weeks ago. Does anybody have any questions or comments about it?
One, or did you go?
No, I have a question.
So my recollection during the budget process, we did a voluntary increase of wages based on cost of living. Did we do that for the police as well as for our employees? I believe we did.
I think when we constructed the budget, we might have kept that at the upper level, at the upper end of what is in the agreement because of the union. But knowing we can also go back and, well, so I think the thought then was, well, we have an agreement in place which sets the limit at, I forget what it is, 3%. So we're going to keep that for budgetary purposes, knowing that we might in the spring go back and say we want to increase it more. And obviously we have already increased it based on the agreement with the union that was actually ratified 3 weeks ago by the select board and then agreed to. So that's not the agreement we're talking about tonight, but that's the answer to your question.
So this increase would be on top of what we did before?
So there's two agreements. So the one agreement that modifies long-term wages with the union, that's already been voted and approved by the select board. When we came out of executive session 3 weeks ago, you made the motion to match the wages with Williston contingent on reaching an agreement with Heinsberg for the temporary reaching an agreement with the union regarding temporary coverage with Heinsberg. So subsequent to that meeting, we worked on finalizing that agreement with the union, which is in regards to temporary coverage from Heinsberg. So that's the agreement that needs to be ratified. The long-term wage one, you already made the motion that you're okay to move forward with that.
Right, okay.
Does that clarify?
so
It gets
I see
confusing with
now.
all the different overlaps.
Okay, so this agreement doesn't pertain to money. It pertains to by mutual consent that we're mutual agreement that we will be contracting with Heinsberg for a certain period of time, and that our officers have the right of first refusal to for times.
That
sums
it up, yes.
Yeah, can we minimize that anyway? I know with them having a fully staffed department, and if we have one, to use the term fly in the ointment or something, who could work any hours, it tends to disrupt, I think if I were on the receiving end, it would be disruptive to scheduling. If I had to move my schedule to fit one person in Richmond.
Well, he's got to speaker or hold his peace by a certain deadline.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is an advance notice kind of.
Yeah, they have to give us 72 hours prior notice to wanting to work an overtime shift.
Okay.
And then we would have to approve that. So,
Okay.
yeah, so there's
being our officer.
our one officer.
As long as
that
it
we
can't
have.
be
Yeah, so
subject
that's
to-
where we're in a bit of, I mean, we're in a unique situation where this agreement kind of doesn't really apply at this moment.
Okay.
Because we've
Yeah.
got one officer who can really only do a couple hours, but should he come off of orders or we get another officer, then the goal would be, all right, here's your 40-hour a week schedule. And then that officer might say, you know what? I got nothing going on Tuesday. That's my scheduled day off. I want to work overtime. We would say, absolutely. And then we would communicate that to Heinsberg that we have an officer who's working overtime on Tuesday.
Because I can see if they're allocating someone to a
Yeah, exactly.
coverage here, and then it changes, it's, the ripple effect is
Okay,
Yep, that's why we added the time to make sure that Heinsberg then knows.
Hmm.
And ideally, I would try to schedule it as early as we can. Because yeah, I want
Yeah,
Heinsberg to
that's
have
always
time to react for sure. So yeah, thank you.
are we ready for a motion? Or do we want to make a motion?
Do we need one?
We need a motion to ratify if you'd like to
Oh,
ratify.
right.
And there should be one in the.
This part, I move to ratify the agreement regarding temporary support from the Heinsberg Police Department between the town of Richmond and New England Police Benevolent Association Local 415.
This is David. I will second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bard to ratify the agreement with Local 415, seconded by David Sander. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
I voted nay for this last time it came around. Now I'm voting nay again.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Okay. So we've done Umiak. Okay. I'm hoping that a couple of these can be super quick. Item O is to officially waive the permit fees to build the cemetery fence, since we would be basically paying $65 to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's Bard, I move to waive the permit and recording fees associated with the installation of fence at Bridge Street Cemetery because the parcel is owned by the town of Richmond.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and
Part of the
second to
town.
waive that fee.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please take your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, aye. Bard, aye.
And J.I. Okay, our next one could potentially also be quick. This consumer price index from April 2022 to April 2023 increased by 3.8%. This is available in the consumer price index report found in the packet. Now, our budget was built with a 5% increase, just, as a placeholder. The motion that Josh is suggesting is to not go to 5, but to go to the 3.8. Is there any discussion about what you think about that?
You can always raise it. It's hard to reduce it.
We're down
Well,
to 3.8%.
So yeah, just a little context here. So I think in the fall, when we were putting the budget together, the CPI at that point, I think, was over 5. Yeah, it was.
It was 6.5.
Something like that. But it was on the downward trend. So we kind of took a guesstimate and said, well, it might be around 5 when we get to the springtime. We're trying to set wages. So in order to build the budget, we picked 5 as a number to go with. Right now, when we looked at it, the April 2022 to April 2023 increase was 3.8. We used the New England number there. So that's one piece of information. Duncan has also been reaching out to the towns that we use in the wage study, the comparable towns, to see, hey, what are you doing for increases? He started to get some of that feedback back. He said, like, some of these are like, 5-page documents about what they're really doing. I guess it's not as simple as, oh, we're doing 4. So he has yet to have a chance to go through a lot of, he was actually out sick a bit last week. So the board could wait to see what that feedback is from other towns. Also think about, you don't have to stick to 3.8. You could go higher or lower, however you choose to go.
Yeah, there's almost certainly a recession happening, and it is going to be evident. So wages are going to be not under pressure pretty soon, so.
Do we wish to kick it down one meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested, it's not only what is inflation doing, but what's the market, the comparables?
Yeah.
Right.
What are they doing?
That's what steals people.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay,
The old.
sounds good. Our next item is a request from the Town Center and Library Building Committee to authorize expending $7,500 for a structural study of the historic building roof, not for the post office, because that's not historic.
Yeah.
Actually,
Jeff, you want to go ahead?
So do you want me to do it?
Yeah, you're better versed than I am.
Okay, so the town center committee in looking at energy issues for this building. One of the things we've been interested in is energy efficiency and renewables, potentially going to net zero. We haven't gotten there yet, but one component of that might be putting solar on the roofs. And putting solar on the roofs, you need to understand whether the structure is capable of holding that. In fact, you need it in order to get a permit. You need a structural analysis. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to take a look at the structure of this roof. I would say it's creative. It's interesting. It has been modified.
Oh, so it's
at
not just the
some time-
original architecture design?
No, it's sometime in the past, it's been modified. The town center committee felt that we had a proposal for both, looking at both this roof and the post office roof. We figured that this roof was more important to look at first.
Yeah.
And more than just for solar, it's.
Right, we might want to put nuclear up there.
Well, we'd like to make sure that the roof is actually remain,
Mhm.
regardless of whether solar's on it or not. It's a much less functional building without the roof.
If that's approvable, are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
Bart, I move to approve the use of $7,500 in the town center fund for the use of up to $7,500 in the town center fund to pay for a structural study of the town center roof.
This is David, I'll second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, second by David Sander, to approve the use of up to $7,500 from the town center fund to pay for a structural roof study of the town center. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next one could be 30 seconds. We want to make it that.
Mhm.
It's to authorize a renewal of the liquor license, tobacco
I
substitute
move to
endorsement.
approve a
for Lucky
second
Spot.
class liquor license, a tobacco license, and a tobacco substitute endorsement for William Donovan Incorporated LLC, doing business as the Lucky Spot Variety.
I'll second. Sorry, Brent.
Okay, we're trying to get to 30 seconds.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff, second from Lisa Miller, to approve the second class tobacco substitute endorsement for William Donovan Inc., doing business as a Lucky Spot. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next one could just be, this is just putting
I
five
move-
more people on the
I move
committee.
to appoint Donna Niket, Donna Lewis, Ken Nussbaum, Harlan Stockwell, Rebecca Roos to the 4th of July Parade and Fireworks Committee.
Bart, I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second made by Jeff Ford, seconded by Bard, to appoint these 5 individuals to the July 4th committee. Please
Lisa,
state your
aye.
name and your vote.
Oh, Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, next, the no parking zone. If you're familiar with this issue, it has to do with the driveways between Richmond Pediatric Medicine and the Catholic Church front
Oh.
parking for driveway.
We got
Um,
something
This
out
is
of
the one number
VTrans.
2, I think,
We
isn't
did.
it?
Holy smokes.
Jeff, it went through various levels, and then Josh and I were invited to a meeting of the traffic committee a week or two ago. It was in Barry. We didn't have to go in person. And it was about maybe 3 minutes discussed, basically just asking this expert, that's the expert, and looking at the map. And they said, sure, it's yours. So they've approved it, and since they're going to be repaving that whole area anyway, that part of VTrans claims it will talk to the paving part of VTrans to get their ducks in a row.
That'll take the most time.
We've seen repeatedly in the past that multiple parts, they don't talk to each other.
So Bart, how long have you been talking to VTrans on this Route 2 improvement?
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's very long time.
I would like to kick the next one. Let's
Uh,
see, is that,
question-
what's the
question,
next
Jay?
one?
Naloxone.
Okay, I'm going to
Question.
tell you what this is about and then defer it down the road.
Jay, I still got a question about the last one.
Oh.
Are they going to stripe that off or skinny the road up, or, I mean, it's gonna look like a parking space. if they don't-
They're going to do various things,
Yeah,
including
they're-
sign-
Including signage.
signage.
Okay. So.
They actually at one point offered us to put a green strip in there. So the,
They might still
Yeah.
need to talk to the project folks about a green strip, so I want to get more information on that before we
Yellow
come back
curve?
to the board.
It could be handy as a
yellow
bypass
curve.
when people are trying to turn into
Yeah.
dance studio and all that, you know.
okay, I'm going to give you the 30-second thing. The state, as you know, has an opioid crisis. Naloxone is available for individuals to administer. Richmond Rescue obviously can. Ben Herrick tells me that he has administered naloxone, but there has been a push at various levels to try to have naloxone available in more places. And so we can talk about this more down the road, but one option would be stocking naloxone in places like the library and the town center and making sure we had a couple of people who had the training to administer it.
That's the requirement.
And
And-
so you're now trained to.
I
do this?
am. Mhm.
Are we gonna try to train somebody who's, although you're here?
Oh,
almost
no,
all
that's the point.
time
The state has a training class
Using, right?
that they'd be happy to administer for us. We just need, does the select board think this is a reasonable idea?
Sure,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
You know, if someone
me about
using
that.
drugs is all, for all kinds of reasons, but to have them die from it isn't necessary.
Yeah, and time, the thing about this is time makes all the difference. 5 minutes can make the difference between living and dying.
Exactly.
And if the rescue squad, both trucks are out and people know that they can come here, I mean,
So who else will be trained?
we'd have to ask. I mean, it'd be great if somebody on the library staff or two could do it.
So on the library, at our department head meeting last week, Rebecca brought up that I don't know if they've gone through the training, but they've had some discussion about this, and I think they're moving towards doing that with her staff. So they're further down the road than we are. in town center.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, it will depend on, I mean, it could be Connie just for some strange reason really wants to be able to do this, or it could be Linda or Ariana, Adriana.
Yep.
So anyway, that's
Cool.
no votes necessary. We can follow up by soliciting input from the staff and,
Sounds great.
okay. Discussion of next select board meeting dates. I think we already, we
4th of July.
discussed July 19th, June 19th, but we didn't do July 5th. Our next meeting would be July 4th is
So
Monday or Sunday?
July 4th
Tuesday.
is a Tuesday.
Okay.
So the question is, do we want to try to meet on the 3rd, which would be after the weekend, right prior to the holiday? Or go to the 5th, which I think the only thing scheduled on the 5th right now, it's a Wednesday. It's planning commission, but they've been meeting virtually 100%, so the room's available.
Okay, so what do people think? You want to meet on the Wednesday?
That sounds all right.
I'm okay with Wednesdays. It doesn't
Yeah.
work for others. Yeah.
We need a motion or not?
You can make a motion, but I'm not sure you have to. We can just
Yeah,
call
we
it a
won't.
special meeting.
Okay.
And Josh, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's a lot better, actually, probably. Depending on all-star baseball schedule that time of year, which. who the
Going
hell
on the
knows?
road.
Okay, do we have any purchase orders?
No.
Okay, we don't have any purchase orders. So we have minutes and warrants to approve. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes of May 15th?
So we're not gonna discuss a temporary police coverage with the.
No, we are. That's after this.
Okay.
To approve the minutes of May 15th.
Second.
Okay, a motion from David, second from Lisa to approve the minutes of May 15th. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye.
move to approve the warrants as presented.
As Bart, I'll second that. Oh,
Okay. We have a motion from David, second from Bart to approve the warrants as presented. Please state your name and your vote. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Next, before our second last thing is items for the next agenda. The Conservation Commission will be presumably granting the RLT permission.
Trails Committee feedback on. the
A nominee.
Brouhaha.
Oh, and on the letter Bruja, but also the Trails Committee, who are they nominating to the ACF?
Oh, yeah, so we got two.
The wage
different.
increase, you know, the.
Right. What does Duncan get back to us about the numbers?
You know, I don't know when, but I appreciate the skills that a new police chief might bring to this position, and I look forward to that. In addition to the skills, what's something that's different for me on policing, any police officer, is temperament. You know, it's different than skills. It's like, you know.
I
who
will
would like
say,
to go?
Jeff, I cannot say strongly enough, that was an overt part of the hiring
Great.
candidate screening selection criteria.
Well, and it shouldn't only be for the chief, it should be for any police officer,
That's
you
a
know,
good
it's a definite, you know, definitely something to think about. So, you know, at some point here, you know, I think, and it need not necessarily be for our next meeting. I'd like to have kind of more of a conversation about what kind of police department do we want to build?
Okay. Okay, anything else? You know how to reach Josh. Okay, our last item before adjournment is Josh and I think it'd be a good idea to have an executive session to discuss. Huh?
Notice David.
Yeah. So we have two motions.
those part, I moved on premature public knowledge about discussions regarding the agreement with Heinsberg for police coverage would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Do we have a second? Motion from Bard, second from David to move to find that premature public knowledge about discussions would cause us to suffer the town or person a substantial disadvantage. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, Bart, aye.
And J.I.
Second motion, I have moved that we enter into executive session to discuss negotiations with Heinsberg for police coverage under the provisions of 1 DSA 313A1A and include the town.
This is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have motions from Bard, second from David to go ahead and move into executive session and to invite the town manager in. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And J.I. Okay, Aaron, we're going out to executive session. After that, we'll be adjourning, so there's really nothing much else to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Duncan. Thanks, Pat.
I'm taking my laptop in, but I've left the film. Okay, can I have a motion and to a second to?
You got it.
Okay, motion from David Sanders, second by Lisa Miller. Please state your name and your vote.
David,
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.